Welcome back to another episode of, Meet Kevin Goes Live to talk about crazy stuff going on in the world. Donald Trump has just walked into the New York court building. He was potentially expected to talk outside of the building. He did not. He just walked right in. I'll go ahead and play what that shot looked like so you could see it. He has an appointment there in about 44 minutes. We expect the arraignment process could end up going pretty dang fast. The big thing that we're looking for here is what are the charges? So as you can see on screen here from NBC, no mugshot, no handcuffs. They will process Donald Trump. And then he will be moved from that booking area to the judicial courtroom where a judge will read the charges off to Donald Trump. There is a chance there will be a break for the defense, Donald Trump's team, to read over the actual indictment, which could actually be quite long. Donald Trump, so far this morning, has been extremely active on Truth Social. We'll go up and pull a little bit of this up in just a moment. Extremely active on Truth Social to the point where he's been attacking the judge and the judge's family, in part because one of the releases reported on Donald Trump's judge here is that the judge's daughter potentially worked for the Biden campaign. The Biden-Harris campaign potentially had the daughter of the judge as a candidate, as sort of a candidate helper, political helper, or something like that. Apparently, she is a partner at Authentic Campaigns, and at some point in the past had a work history on her LinkedIn, which included working for the Biden-Harris campaign, which, of course, Donald Trump and Trump Jr. jumped on, arguing that this is all set up, that essentially everyone is handpicked. Here you'll see Donald Trump. There he is, sort of in the middle there, walking. No statement from Donald Trump. This was just moments ago. Donald Trump gave no statement to the public. Pretty much every single police officer in NYPD, in the New York Police Department, is present in New York and on duty today. And so far, everything seems pretty relaxed. Again, we're waiting for that indictment to come out now. So let's listen in here to see what NBC is suggesting. And then we're going to go through some of the Truth Social posts as well while we wait for the indictment. Let's see here. Let's fast forward a little bit. There we go.
Over the last couple of weeks, since we first reported that security was being ramped up and preparation was underway for the grand jury to act, it has been hundreds and hundreds of threats that have been filing in. So the security precautions, understandable why the president had what amounted to, from 1:09 p.m. when he left Trump Tower, he made it down to and walked into that building at 1:24. That's 15 minutes. On a normal day in New York City, you're lucky if you make it in 45 minutes to an hour.
Well, we may or may not see him in front of that camera shortly, but apparently he is still communicating via Truth Social. Let's go to Kristen Walker. Kristen, what do you know?
Lester, this was posted just moments ago from the former president on his Truth Social website. Let me read it to you. He says, heading to Lower Manhattan, the courthouse seems so surreal. Wow, they are going to arrest me. Can't believe this is happening in America. MAGA in all caps. This is significant, Lester, because it is consistent with the line of attacks that we have seen from Mr. Trump against this entire process. This is consistent with the line of attacks we have seen from his other GOP rivals, really trying to make the case that this is a political persecution against the former president. But look, I spoke to a source close to the former president who said to me, the president sees this as a really tough couple of days. Let's not forget, yes, politically speaking, he is using this moment to try to galvanize his supporters and his base, but he is still facing an indictment, some 30 charges that we are waiting to see what exactly they...
Yeah, and it's important to think about that. He has not had this much attention for his campaign since he announced his campaign almost a year ago. That's pretty incredible because he announced his campaign. Essentially pre-announced his campaign. He was the first one to announce I don't think his campaign has as much media coverage as it does now. And a lot of people who have, dare I say, sort of cast aside Donald Trump as I'm going to part ways with Donald Trump potentially as a Republican, are potentially rejuvenated to be attracted back to Donald Trump because of what's being seen as sort of a politicized witch hunt, as Donald Trump describes. Let's take a look at the Truth Social posts here for a moment. So this is the heading to the Lower Manhattan. The courthouse seems surreal post that we just heard read. Let's go through some of these others here. When you see rhinos, whoops, there we go, Truth Social being a little buggy, like Karl Rove, Bill Barr, or Paul Ryan on your television screen, just turn to a different station or turn off your set. You're better off watching the Democrats. Ouch. Why does Fox keep putting on Bill Barr? As Attorney General, he was a complete coward who was absolutely petrified of being impeached, while the Democrats threatened to do until he became their virtual slave and refused to investigate and prosecute the massive election fraud that took place in the 2020 election campaign, or 2020 presidential election. Of course, remember Dominion. Dominion is currently being sued, or Dominion is doing the suing. Dominion Voting Machines is suing Fox News for covering the election fraud in a way that sort of implied that Dominion was at fault for the election fraud. And Bloomberg Intelligence provides a 70% chance that Dominion will win that case and potentially win $350 to $500 million of damages for the reputation damage against Dominion Voting Machines. Let's listen into Fox for a moment.
Laid out by them.
You know, when you consider, Brian, that he was appointed by then Mayor Bloomberg to the family court in 2006, Judge Merchan's life and his caseload has certainly taken a turn for the more, greater public visibility as well as notoriety here. Wow.
Now, at this arraignment, Brian, this is Jillian. We know that in order for Trump to receive these charges today at the courthouse, what went on preceding this is that at least 12 out of the 23 grand jurors assigned to this case had to agree there was enough material evidence to press forward with this case.
Yeah, and remember, it's important that when we think of a grand jury is a group of people who decide whether or not to bring charges. And then a jury, different from a grand jury, will determine if you are indeed guilty or not. You could also have a bench trial where a judge would make that decision. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene was asked via the Financial Times by the New York mayor to please behave at the protests in New York. Apparently, she only stayed outside for about a minute, long enough for some social media posts. At least that's what's being reported right now on Bloomberg as Donald Trump is being processed inside the court facility here.
When this arraignment is done, we'll relay to the rest of us and to the world what was said. And we're going to send a producer to the court clerk and try to get a copy of that indictment. We have no indication that it's going to be handed out to the press willy-nilly, for instance, just given to anybody who shows up to court. But as soon as we get a sense of that indictment, we'll be able to go through those charges and be able to finally verify what's been reported for over the last couple of weeks. And Jillian, one more point. New York law states that if you were to break a gag order and if that were to be implemented by the judge, it would be a $1,000 fine and up to 30 days in prison or both. But that, again, obviously extremely hypothetical. We don't know what's going to happen, but I just wanted to clarify that in sense of what kind of punishment we're talking about here in New York.
Just want to flag for our viewers what you were seeing. There was a head-on shot of the president for the first time. He gave a fist bump to the crowd after he got out of the limo before he headed inside the courthouse. Brian Yannis, stick with us. We'll come back to you shortly.
Okay, let's switch for a moment.
In Alexandria, Virginia, 3 miles from the Pentagon, and we assembled a fair jury. Again, folks on the jury had heard of 9/11, of course, and maybe even had known of somebody who lost somebody in that horrific attack. What you're looking for are jurors who will listen to the judge's instructions.
All right, this is more grand jury selection process. Let's jump over. Let's try to give some balanced view and see if we can get a little bit of that here.
Fairly sizable population.
Whoops. This one.
The attorney said earlier to come to the cameras and make a brief statement. He has not done so, obviously. He just got here, so we're just waiting on him to come up here. I will say, as we were talking about the processing here, looks like I was told before this that as they were discussing the logistics of the actual choreography of this visit, Trump had expressed some interest in actually having his mugshot taken. Obviously, they have been viewing a lot of this through the lens of what it would look like when it comes to the 2024 campaign, how to use it to their advantage when it comes to fundraising. And they believe having that mugshot taken could actually be beneficial to them potentially. So we don't know that that's happening, obviously, but that is part of the mindset into how they're looking at this, not just from a legal perspective, but also from a campaign and a political perspective. We'll see what it is he says before cameras. His attorneys, his legal team, and his aides have been obviously concerned that it could be something that could maybe not help his case in this situation.
That's interesting how they were basically debating, hey, should we have a mugshot or not? I don't think it would be a good idea to have a mugshot. I don't think a good mugshot is ever a good thing.
Right.
All right, let's flip back.
Panel in there and say, can you be fair? Even if you have an opinion on Donald Trump, can you be fair? And look, I'm not the lawyer that Turley and McCarthy are, but my advice to the president, if you are complaining about pretrial publicity, having a rally could possibly undercut that. If your argument is there's just too much pretrial publicity, then having a press conference and a rally may actually be contributing to the pretrial publicity.
Trey, let's talk about the charges that are hopefully going to be unsealed imminently. We don't know what is in them, as you rightfully pointed out. A lot of sort of finger pointing has been based on speculation to date. But we know, thanks to court leaks, direct to Fox News Channel, that there are at least 30 distinct charges. One of them is reportedly a felony. What types of charges could be included here? We know that all eyes are on the alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. There's been some reporting. There could be charges related to Karen McDougal as well, other kinds of business dealings, possibly. What is the likeliest scenario to your legal mind?
Oh, gosh, I'm terrible at speculating, but my guess would be, because the way prosecutors' minds work is they think, if I don't have great facts, let me at least have a bunch of counts. So it might be 34 different instances of Michael Cohen being reimbursed for legal expenses by the former president. If it's 34 discrete fact patterns, 34 different Stormy Daniels and McDougals, then that may be a challenge.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Is this just 34 counts of nonsense? All right, like basically the same thing attacked many different ways. Everybody's waiting for this indictment. We just want to see what the charges are. Come on. Yahoo says it's 34 counts of falsifying business records. But is it just versions of the same thing? It's a good point.
Trumped up charges. Pardon the pun.
Let's go to Andy McCarthy, Trey, because you mentioned him. And I know that you weren't a young lad when Aaron Burr was tried. You were in law school at the time, as I recall. But Trey makes the point, Andy, that an impartial jury was found for that trial. Can an impartial jury be found for Donald Trump? I think since Hamilton, the play came out, everybody knows who Aaron Burr is. So this day and age, you might have a harder time getting that impartial jury. But seriously, I think this is a big issue. I appreciate what Trey said, but I don't know anybody who doesn't know Donald Trump and hasn't formed an opinion of him one way or the other.
Well, John, I appreciate you and Trey because my sons think I was at the trial of Socrates. So if
I'm going to back off their opinion for a moment. I just want to say, like, I don't know. I think it's possible. I think it's absolutely possible to find an impartial jury. I know it'll be difficult, but I mean, I just try to put myself in my in the shoes of a potential juror. Obviously, I'm not, but I think all of us could do that. And maybe not all of us. Maybe some of us are like, hell no, I'd never do anything against Trump, right? But I think there are a lot of us who could be pretty impartial on a jury. I don't know. Then again, that's the tough thing is everybody has some kind of preconceived bias. You know, personally, I loved Donald Trump when he was on The Original Apprentice. I thought he was an inspiration. Then Celebrity Apprentice became a little bit more of a clown show. That was my opinion. But you know, and then you know, some things were good and some things were not so good during his presidency. Just trying to sum that up. But yeah, it makes you wonder, like, how much have people's biases been affected by really just the drama of the last, almost 7+ years here of Trump politics? I mean, since he started campaigning, probably 8 years. It's a good point. It's a fair point. Let's listen in over here.
One of the big questions we all have once we actually see the document is, what is their theory of the case? And is there anything there that's new? Is there any fresh evidence? You know, we understand they subpoenaed a number of different records. They had a number of different witnesses in front of this grand jury. That's all under seal. It's all supposed to maintain a secret process to protect the integrity of the investigation. And so I'm looking for, in that indictment, is there anything other than a falsification of business records charge? Is there a conspiracy related charge? Is there banking? Is there tax fraud? We know that his former chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, actually pled guilty to tax fraud and falsifying business records, the very issue that we think is at the center of this case. And so we need to see sort of, how do they explain their theory of the case and what's their legal hook? We've talked for days about how normally this would be a misdemeanor charge, right? How are they going to elevate it to a felony? What's their hook there? You need to have...
Yeah, well, we've actually heard that hook and the explanation for that many times. I'm going to hop to Truth Social, but I'll quickly explain the hook. It's very simple. It's that New York has a code, the Section Penal Code 175, and it says if you falsify business records, that is a misdemeanor. That would be like saying, hey, my boss said that $700 was a business expense. Okay, and then let's make up a fake receipt to justify that. That would be falsifying business records. The boss gets in trouble. The employee could use that as a defense, that it was my boss that told me to do it, and that's a misdemeanor charge. Now, if that falsification of a business record now potentially helped cover up that there was another, crime that occurred, like potentially those $700, that $700 business expense wasn't actually business expense. It was laundered money, as an example, right? Well, now you've got two crimes. And so you could elevate the falsifying of business records to a Class E felony in New York, which is the lowest form of a felony. And the big frustration, obviously, in the political regime right now of, America, is that, what the hell, New York? You guys downgrade 50% of your felonies, including people who have literally killed other people. You are downgrading felonies left and right. You essentially you earn convictions on about 28% of your felonies. You earn convictions on just 25% of your misdemeanors. And you're supposed to somehow now be elevating misdemeanors to felonies against Donald Trump? Let's see the evidence, because so far it seems politicized. Fair points on both sides. So what do we got right here on Truth Social? What we've got is very unfair venue, with some areas that voted 1% Republican. Do keep in mind that in the 2020 presidential election and the 2016 presidential election, the votes were 76 and 78% for Democrats, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. And Donald Trump was in the mere 14 to 18% range during those elections. So yes, Manhattan is substantially left-leaning. So on a voter rolls point of view, 100% highly Democratic state, left-leaning, should I say district, or however we want to call it, Manhattan City, the city with 5 boroughs. Anyway, boroughs. Gosh, Kevin, get your English right. Anyway, we keep going here. What are the 5? No. Manhattan, Queens, Bronx. Okay, anyway, let's keep going here. Okay, very unfair venue with some areas that voted 1% Republican. The case should be moved to a nearby Staten Island. That would be very fair and a secure location for the trial. Additionally, the highly partisan judge and his family are well-known Trump haters. He was an unfair disaster on the previous Trump-related case. Keep in mind, that was the Trump Organization tax fraud case. Oh, let's see if we get a shot of Trump here. Hold on a sec.
Pass through in front of this lens?
So they'll pass through, but the courtroom, I believe, is behind those blacked out windows. So he's going to come out of the elevator bank, make a quick turn, and go into the back corner courtroom if that is still the 15th floor courtroom that they are using. So as you see, that is a pool camera that has been positioned front and center for all news media to share. And so it'll be a very quick shot of the former president going into that courtroom.
If he wants to say anything, he could walk to that
He
stanchion.
can, and we were told they are preparing for that possibility, but we are here hearing from the defense side that there is no plan for him to speak at the courthouse, that they plan to leave right away, get to LaGuardia Airport. He wants to get back to Florida as quickly as possible to prepare for his primetime 8:15 p.m. speech, announcement, press conference to talk about what has happened.
All right, let me ask you about these indictments and the way that they are made available to not only the counsel, but to the media. You've covered a lot of trials in that courthouse. How does that typically work? How long before we might see something and have it in our hands?
Really, right now, because of the way the judge has restricted access and the way the court works, you have to get hard copies from the clerk's office after the hearing. It takes a while. So we're at the mercy of the district attorney's office right now to email us the hard copy of the charging document.
You know, it's really bullcrap. Like, let me just say it. At this point, the indictment should be out. Like, this is, it's, I don't want to curse. Cover the children's ears, but I got to do it. It's bullshit. The indictment isn't out yet. This is ridiculous. I don't understand. Are they trying to get him out of here first because they're worried the indictment's gonna, have something in it that's kind of like people don't believe or whatever, and there's some kind of reason for risking a protest or something? It just seems ridiculous that it's not out yet.
Some highlights of the main charges. There'll be some back and forth on the calendaring of the next court hearing, which is probably in May or June, as whether there'll be any admonishment from the judge regarding public statements regarding this case, all to be determined. And Garrett will be in the courtroom. Melissa Russo of WNBC will be in the courtroom. There are 60 seats for reporters in the actual courtroom, 200 seats in the overflow rooms, but it's going to be a little while before we see the actual document. We're at the mercy of the DA, and when they press send on the email or post on
scan it.
Or scan
If they have a scanner in the courthouse.
That massive sigh you just heard, by the way, all my legal friends here, like, how long?
Checking, we don't have it yet.
Right. It's just not the New York court system, the way it's set up. It's just not, it's not PACER. It's not the federal system or some of the other state systems. It is a bit slower. And because the judge has not allowed cameras in and he's not allowing any sort of communication from.
Why? Why would you not allow cameras in? Like, there should be cameras there. This should not be, let's hide from cameras. That's another thing that's just bull crap.
To email out, and usually they email it as soon as the hearing ends. So that's when I would expect the email to come, because to date, the district attorney's office has been following what he does in other cases, he's doing in this case, which is, I'm not unsealing early, even though there's enormous public interest, even though the court was on standby the day the indictment came by, that they were willing to entertain a motion from the DA to unseal right away. The DA said, no, I am going to handle this like any other case, and they wait until the defendant appears in court. Then literally the unsealing, the envelope gets handed to the judge and or the clerk, and it gets taken out, and now it is public. And that's when this document first becomes public in that Manhattan courtroom.
Obviously, he is getting special treatment.
Keep in mind what he just described is just a BS political process that could easily be modified, just like everything else here.
Look, he is the former president of the United States. He is surrounded by Secret Service agents. So is he a flight risk? He's the most recognizable man on the planet. So there's no need for a mugshot at this time. Whether they changed their mind when he came in, and the capability, we were told, was put in place. Originally, we were told it may not have been in place. It was made to be put in place in case they changed their mind. But in terms of special treatment, much of what we're seeing today is for the security reasons associated with this case, both for, again, the president and the judge and the DAs and the surrounding community, to make that building a fortress, to make sure it is safe and secure for everyone involved, and to get the president in and out, former president in and out as quickly as possible. So that is the logic certainly behind the court officers, the Secret Service, the NYPD, and everything you've seen in terms of, quote, special treatment. The logic, again, you have to go back. There have been a ton of threats, unsubstantiated, but a ton of threats associated with this case so far.
Okay, there's just now a note coming through that potentially the daughter of that Manhattan judge did not only work for the Biden-Harris administration, but potentially also worked with the congressional campaign of a Democrat Adam Schiff, who's a representative, he was also one of the folks involved in the impeachment of Donald Trump. But then again, most Democrats were. So clearly seems like she's a Democratic strategist. So probably the list of Democrats she's worked for is very long. At this point, it's kind of like, all right, we get it. But it is a little weird, right? Because it's the daughter of the judge. Anyway.
Doing the grand jury investigation with the grand jurors and forming the indictment, it has been the advantage to the DA because the DA can take all of the information that the DA knows and can craft the indictment in such a way that as much evidence as possible is going to come in at this trial. So if a conspiracy is charged, if tax fraud is charged, if the McDougal hush money payment is charged in addition to the Stormy Daniels hush money payments, this enables the DA's office, the prosecutors, to bring in as much evidence as they want if it relates to charges that are actually in the indictment. One of the most important things that a judge has to rule on is what evidence comes in at trial. And if these events are actually charged in the indictment, if a broader case is charged.
Keep in mind, these McDougal payments are for potential payments of $150,000 to a former Playboy model, Karen McDougal, which presently the information regarding that remains under seal. So we'll see what gets unsealed here. Let's pop over for a moment to this view.
The judge is supposed to be this Judge Merchan. At least that's what the Trump people have put out. And it should be a quick proceeding. Because it's a formal indictment, this will be an arraignment. When people are arrested on a police complaint, they call that a presentment, and you don't have to enter a plea. But here he's indicted, so that will be a formal arraignment, which means he'll enter a plea of not guilty. There isn't an issue of bail because this is a nonviolent offense. Under New York law, he'll be released on his own recognizance. And I guess the importance here is that the judge should begin to set a discovery schedule and a motion schedule. And as a number of my co-panelists here have pointed out, the motion schedule is probably the most important thing because I think this is a case that ought to be dismissed on the papers before it ever gets to trial.
Well, I think former President Trump is expecting that he will be allowed to leave the courthouse because he has got at 8 o'clock tonight plans for a news conference at Mar-a-Lago after he gets back to Florida. What we're looking at right now.
Okay, there's no question of that. He's getting out. I don't even know why they're even remotely teasing that idea that he's not going to be able to leave from court tonight. So I think that's a little odd. And therefore, now I will change the channel. Here we go.
It's the judge's call as to when he's ready. They have a room reserved. We've been told a conference room or an empty courtroom on this floor for the attorneys and aides to gather. As Ali pointed out, that's probably where they're leafing through what could be a 50-page indictment to learn it.
Adam Kaufman, former prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, is also joining us as well in the conversation. Adam, what are your thoughts as we wait to get sight of the former president about? I mean, what are you going to be listening for in the indictments once they are read out? What's in them and what's not in them?
I think it's really interesting to think about how this indictment might be framed. And, you know, we think about the false business records. I wonder if any of the valuation issues, the financial fraud type of issues that were part of the prior investigation and grand jury and feature a large part in the civil case filed by the Attorney General. I wonder if any of that will be in it. You know, an indictment like this, if you can
take a listen here or just a look for a moment at this was yesterday. Trump Jr. posted this. Looks like that was as they were leaving in West Palm Beach, presumably from Mar-a-Lago.
And so I'm wondering
Adam,
if there is,
Let me ask you, why does a conspiracy count allow you to then have a narrative? I understand the idea of a narrative in the indictment that tells a story rather than just a dry recitation of facts, but why does a conspiracy count give you that?
So a conspiracy count lets the prosecution frame the conspiracy and describe the evidence that the grand jury heard. If generally speaking, if you're talking about, for example, falsifying business records, The boilerplate language is just a dry recitation of the facts. The defendant on such and such a date with fraudulent intent caused false entries in the records of a business with intent to conceal the commission of another crime. You can add a little bit to it, but it doesn't lend itself to really telling a narrative or a story. A conspiracy is more of a story. And so that's what I would hope to see. But on the other hand, you have to have a crime which was the object of it has to be a conspiracy to do something.
What makes it a conspiracy?
So that's a great question. A conspiracy is nothing more than an agreement between two people to commit a crime. And you can describe what the agreement was and what the conspiracy hoped to accomplish. And so that really gives the prosecution a strong ability to craft this sort of narrative, much more common in federal practice than in state practice. But it's a great opportunity for the prosecution to make a public statement within the four corners of the indictment.
Given that Michael Cohen has served time for his involvement in this, and there was an unindicted co-conspirator in the federal case, does that lead you to believe that there would be a conspiracy count?
The problem is that the crime that Michael Cohen pled to involving Mr. Trump was this, or involving co-conspirator number one, involved this federal campaign or election law violation. The Manhattan DA's office cannot prosecute that crime. It's a federal offense. So they couldn't articulate that as a conspiracy to commit that crime because it's not a state crime. And so it makes you wonder, is there another financial crime? For example, they could do this through a scheme to defraud. That would be
this is a big thing, is a lot of people wondering, like, hey, what else are we going to find out? Let's take just a little review visit here of the motorcade pulling up. Kind of neat to see, and then we'll pop back on over here to that hallway. Donald Trump is expected to be walking through in just a moment, but gives you a little bit of picture here. Here's Donald Trump's motorcade. It took about 15 minutes for him to get from Trump Tower to downtown. Oh, well, I wouldn't necessarily say downtown. I suppose this was more closer to the financial district. It's pretty good. I guess that could be considered downtown. Trump Tower, a little more uptown. Maybe that's where that old school phrase came from. The cop shows, I'm going to take you downtown. Donald Trump take you downtown. Here he is. A little replay of his arrival here. And it's getting a little busy in the hallway here, so let's go back to this.
Doors opened, a number of people.
It's the DA's staff.
That's the DA's staff? What does that tell you about
I saw Sue Hoffinger, Peter Pope were there. I couldn't see everyone, but I see some financial crimes analysts going in. So it looks like it's the team that worked on this indictment.
So where are they coming from and where are they going to? Are they going to the courtroom?
They're going in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the door that the president, Karen, that's the door the former president is likely to come through, and the courtroom is immediately to the left?
So there are many doors into the courtroom, and it's not just this one door. There are side doors and there's a back door.
You're not just speaking metaphorically.
So there are many doors in the courtroom and many hallways that lead to each door, depending on where someone's coming from. A judge comes in a different door, a jury comes in even another door, a defendant who's incarcerated comes in a different door, the public comes in the main door. So there are many doors to choose from, depending on, for security reasons, which way they decided Mr. Trump should go.
I was going to say, Anderson, just this one thing I was just thinking about right here is the irony of the situation. All those rallies where the MAGA crowd chanted, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. And Donald Trump is now locked up right now at this point in time. So,
yeah, it's a stretch. He's not locked up. All right, let's go ahead and flip channels. Now, as soon as we get bias, what do? We flip the channel.
Being arraigned and saying the words not guilty. It's not a good look. It doesn't help him. That's why he's going to control the narrative, leave the courthouse, go back to home base in Florida, and then he'll make his statements. But, the interesting thing, there are a lot of different defendants out there for whom being charged with a crime isn't the devastating thing that it would be for everybody else. And for someone like Trump, he's someone that appears to be unbothered. It's water off a duck's back. So he's walking into court. He's waving. He's probably not going to give a statement here. But look, criminal courts, especially white-collar criminals, are the type that never believe that they did anything wrong. And the irony is they will tell their lawyers about how this is all a big misunderstanding and I didn't do anything wrong. They'll want to control the way the case goes, not realizing the irony that doing things the way they want to do it is what got them a case in the first place.
All right, we're looking at this picture now. This is Jonathan, 15th floor?
Yeah, 15th floor. So we just saw a moment ago, excuse me, Lester,
sure.
The members of the prosecution executive team come through the blacked out doors there from the elevator and go into Part 59, which we believe is the courtroom that's going to be handling this. And we are awaiting the arrival, we believe, of the former president, who will come up those back elevators, come through those doors and those few short steps into the courtroom for the hearing. Again, it's scheduled to start at 2:15 today, but again, it's unclear if it will start on time. It's unclear if and when the defense is going to be provided a copy of that indictment. Joe Tacopina, again, earlier said he may want some extra time with the defense team and with Mr. Trump to review those documents. So court officials have informed us there is a back room behind the courtroom that if they want a little extra time to go over the document and speak to Mr. Trump and converse about how they're going to handle this hearing, this 2:15 start, if it starts on time, could be delayed if that request is made.
And will part of this process be scheduling a new date? And what would that next date be for?
Well, some legal experts, Danny might know better than me, would say this is months away. You're looking at a May, June return at best.
Yeah, I actually think they're right about that.
They're going to file a motion to dismiss. They're going to file motions alleging the DA is biased.
Did that happen today?
No,
they won't file the motion today.
Okay.
Under the rules, some motions have to be filed, I believe, within, I think it's 45 days. So, for example, within that 45 days, you might see a venue transfer motion. The strange thing about those motions is that courts in New York almost never deal with them. They would prefer to get to voir dire and actually the trial date to deal with that. But you will see some motions filed in all likelihood within 45 days of the arraignment, because that's the date that many motions have to be filed in the state of New York by the rule. So yes, the next date is probably going to be something that is scheduled for a motions hearing, because you have a relatively short period of time. Once you notice that motion, notify the court and your adversaries that you're making a motion. The court will usually set a hearing date, or in New York, for example, sometimes the litigants, at least in civil court, can pick a date themselves, which the court may move around depending on scheduling. So, look, the court will accommodate dates for regular unknown litigants. They're certainly going to accommodate the wishes of these litigants because it's what they do anyway. And that goes for trial dates, too. A lot of folks are asking, when's the trial date? Well, I think the answer to that is, what do the parties want? Because I've had trials.
All right, now keep in mind, Marjorie Taylor Greene was outside briefly for only about a minute. She was getting heckled by protesters. You've got, she's from Georgia. Georgia is her district, and she showed up to protest. She was only there briefly. She ended up getting heckled. AOC responded to that and wrote, "Welcome to New York City," with a Statue of Liberty emoji, and then wrote, "Where there are still social consequences for shameless bigotry." That is by AOC. She, Marjorie Taylor Greene, apparently delivered brief remarks discussing what she said were basically Democratic communists. And that's what she's trying to bring attention to. Let's listen in over here now.
Going after Trump for in a $250 million lawsuit for defrauding lenders and others. And there's also a defamation case that's set to be heard in April, as that's set to be held in April here in New York. Somebody accusing him of battery and whatnot. So this is on multiple fronts here in New York. This is the only criminal matter, but yeah, he's got some issues here. John, go back. We'll go back to you. Go ahead.
Hey, Brian, sorry. It looked like there was some imminent activity there with a number of people who are coming back and forth through that door. And we are getting very close. We're just 10 minutes away from the scheduled time of the arraignment. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss anything with the former president coming through. I mean, there's no question that prosecutors in the state of New York seem to definitely want to make a point of trying to bring criminal charges and a conviction against former President Trump, which again is why Jillian, this idea of a gag order, when that's his only way, really, of fighting back against public officials making comments about him, about the media globally that will be covering this case. How do you take that platform away from him?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
One of the primary beefs, for lack of a better word, that President Trump's supporters have with the indictment is that they feel that even without a gag order, this limits his ability to speak open and honestly on the presidential trail, on the campaign trail, about what he is facing in court. They feel that this puts an undue burden on him, as Martha spoke about a few minutes ago. It also puts a burden on him to fight a legal battle, potentially more than one legal battle at the same time.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and say, look, I think the worst thing, the absolute worst thing that could be done is some kind of gag order against Trump. The last thing I think America wants is Donald Trump completely silenced. People revolted against Twitter and Facebook for banning Donald Trump, and it ended up galvanizing his supporters more. Let him say what he wants to say. If you support him, or want to pay attention to what he's doing, you can. If you don't want to, then don't. Just like he would have free speech, you should have the freedom to choose to listen or not. So I doubt we'd see some sort of a gag order like that.
Pointing out the myriad.
Hello, Mr. Jack. Come on in. You want to say hi? Yeah. All right. You know what's happening on TV right up there? No. Mr. President Trump, the last president, is technically at a jail building right now because they are trying to get him in trouble. And so we'll see what happens. We don't even really know for what yet. We think it has to do with making some fake documents and paying some people money he shouldn't have paid. What do you think about that? Mm-hmm. So you're gonna watch with me?
Yeah, I want to get something ready.
Yeah, go ahead. Do whatever you want. All right.
Close to bringing charges in Fulton County. There was a development in court last week which makes me think that we may see that on or before May 1st. And then as our reporting today has shown, the special counsel appointed by the Biden Justice Department is working diligently away at trying to make a case on the Mar-a-Lago documents and on January 6th. So that case is moving forward too. We may have all these charges if there are more.
Somebody, Honest Harry in chat here is asking, Kevin, how is it that they upgraded the charges from a misdemeanor to a Class C felony by charging him with a federal election finance related charges when he is being prosecuted in state court? Well, they're not actually charging him with, we don't know exactly what they're charging him with yet, right? We don't know the answer to that yet. But what we believe they're planning on doing is hold on a sec. Let's listen in here for a sec.
That Alvin Bragg stood down because
it's just getting busy there. What we believe they're doing is
cases, but he has his own constituency. Again,
So what we believe they're doing is saying, look, in New York, it is a misdemeanor to falsify business records. But if you falsify business records and also cover up another crime, whether or not you get prosecuted for that other crime or not doesn't so much matter. The fact that another crime was enabled by your cover-up, boom, elevated to Class C felony. So they're not actually getting him, in my opinion, on campaign finance related because they're not prosecuting that. Somebody else can prosecute that. I believe it's just on the documents that they're now elevating to the lowest tier of felony. Let's keep listening in. Good question, though.
Here, so I want to draw.
You want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a little robot.
You want to show? Okay, Karen's gonna come protect everyone.
Okay, this is a robot. I bought it at a YouTuber's shop. It's their name, their channel name is Kinkowski. And if you go to
hold on, here's Bragg. Hold on.
Decided by a handful of
Bragg just walked by through that door right there. I'll replay it right here because I think it's interesting to see. Let me see if I can rewind on this one. I just saw him live walking through that door. I actually don't know if they have there he is. Here he comes. There he is on the right. All right, now we're waiting for Trump. So this is more of the live shot right here.
Right now, it is a unifying effect. When you have Jeb Bush coming out in support.
So you got this at a YouTuber shop. Thank you, sir. We got to listen for a moment, okay, sir?
Yeah.
You can hang out.
Politically based when you have parts of the Republican Party who are not inclined to back Donald Trump speaking up for him. And you have a unifying effect in the base that you've seen polls go up and fundraising increase in the short term. In the short term, there's a clear shot in the arm as far as attention. The fact that it's wall-to-wall news coverage is, harkens back to the 2015, 2016 timeframe when the president was not president and he was getting this kind of attention on the trail. I think, as time goes on and how these other cases play out, other candidates will maybe look to talk about that, about running for office without the chaos, without everything that surrounds it. Asa Hutchinson, the former Arkansas governor, is already doing that, but he's alone.
Quick reminder to get yourself 12 free stocks at metkevin.com/free.
Same sheet of music that they think this is a political prosecution on the Republican side.
Yeah, again, we're now within 3 minutes of the scheduled start time of this arraignment hearing. We saw Alvin Bragg, as Brett was pointing out, walk in. We have seen Walt Nauta, who is the president's personal aide, come through those doors. The president, the former president, usually not far behind. So we're expecting that this is going to happen in the next little while. It is, I think, worthwhile as we await the arraignment here that Alvin Bragg has been really making a career here out of downgrading felony charges in 2023 of 1,972 cases. 54% of those felonies were downgraded to misdemeanors. The year before, 52% were downgraded. And when you take a look at the number of felony cases resulting in convictions, this year to date, 52% resulting in convictions, 50% last year. So it was.
And keep in mind, that's after 50% are downgraded. So it's really more like 25%, right? So they take 50% of felonies, downgrade those to misdemeanors, and then of the felonies they keep, they have a 50% conviction rate.
That gives the president, former president, a pretty good chance at beating this.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, it seems the opposite is, according to our legal analyst, is happening with this case and these charges against the former president. They say Bragg is taking what is essentially, usually, historically treated as a misdemeanor and elevating it to a felony. Also important to point out, John.
Yeah, with the Yahoo leak was 34 charges of falsifying business records. I think it could be related to campaign finance violations, but we're not sure if those will actually be the charges from this local court here or if they're just going to focus on the falsifying business records. But the information that is revealed from this investigation could end up turning into future or additional cases. But yes, the payment from Stormy Daniels was made by Michael Cohen. We know that. The question is, did Donald Trump reimburse it? There was a letter from Michael Cohen's attorney that said, no, Donald Trump did not personally, nor did the Trump organization reimburse, Donald Trump's campaign and the Trump organization did not reimburse Michael Cohen. But what if the Trump Family Trust did, or he personally did, right? The letter didn't say that. Let's listen in more.
Charges, all of them, which will answer some of the questions, whichever way this thing goes, whether it fuels the fire of people who say this is political persecution, or it redeems Bragg, and perhaps he has had access to information, evidence, witness testimony that those who came before him did not. We will hopefully find out in the next few minutes.
No, Donald Trump is not prohibited from running if he is charged for presidency. Donald Trump should get life insurance in as little as 5 minutes. You know, our good old paid promotion. But Apple Pay or Android Pay for it. But no, just by being charged, you're not excluded from running for president or even being president. In theory, he could get convicted of all of these crimes and still become president.
On what he has been saying about Alvin Bragg and Judge Juan Merchan on Truth Social, that he will probably voice his opinion on what he thinks of this process and how he believes it's unfair, how he thinks that the venue is unfair, and that he is being, in his mind, unfairly persecuted for what transpired. Eric Trump again was saying, and Martha pointed this out as well, that this city has gone, or this prosecutor has gone to enormous expense for a $130,000 non-disclosure agreement. Now, again, if you're accusing someone of a crime and prosecuting them for a crime, you don't do a
This is a little bit more than a non-disclosure agreement. I mean, that is Fox's bias coming through right there. All right, guys, listen up. We're going to call the silencing fee an NDA.
Let's go ahead and bring back Jonathan Turley now. Jonathan, just a few moments until we're going to have access to those charges. We're hoping that they will be revealed in their entirety shortly after the former president goes into the courtroom. We do have a producer inside. He will be sending us information as soon as he gets out of there. He's not allowed to have a phone with him and communicate on it while he's inside there. But talk to us about reporting today confirmed to Fox News that there are more than 30 charges. One of those is a felony.
Well, one very likely has to be a felony. If they're going to use this bootstrap argument of the New York misdemeanor, they have to bring that misdemeanor back to life. And the only way to do it is to say it was committed to hide a felony. So that would be part of that theory. Look, we've all known the most obvious fact that history is being made. The question we're going to learn in the next few minutes is what type of history? Is it good or bad history? Many of us have no objection to a former president being indicted. That can be a vindication of the rule of law. It can also be the degradation of the rule of law. If you proceed against a former president for political reasons, it is the very antithesis of our legal system. So whatever comes out of that gate in a few minutes, hopefully will be more than what we have heard if the rule of law is going to be vindicated. Hopefully it'll be more than just 34 versions of this rather dubious legal theory that's been bantered about for weeks. Now, the suggestion is that there might be something new in the indictment. What we're looking for is, are there new crimes? Are all of these related to payments around 2016? Are they all based on different variations of this bootstrap argument? Alternatively, do they have some new crimes that might deal with business or tax fraud?
That's what everybody's kind of excited to see is, are there going to be new announcements or crimes here? Let's listen to Marjorie for a moment while we wait. Let's see here.
Also, to the Mayor Adams, as you can see, I'm sitting here peacefully protesting, but you called me out by name. While you allow crime in your streets and you send your henchmen down here to commit assault against people by making loud noises, assault against police officers who are doing their jobs, trying to prevent violence. Democrats are the party of violence. They're the party that enabled and funded and cheered for violent riots all through 2020. And they allowed cities to be burned, $2 billion worth of damage. That's the Democrat Party. But we're the party of peace. We're the party that wants to protect the lives of the unborn. We're the party of male and female, two genders only. We're the party of secure borders. We're the party that will bring peace to the world like President Trump did, not World War III like Joe Biden is doing. We're the party of economic prosperity. We're the party where every American can live the American dream. But the Democrats are the communists. Democrats are the communists. They're destroying America.
Take a picture, don't push.
Destroying freedom. Democrats are the ones that have nothing to campaign for because they are failures, and they're proving it today. I want to thank the New York City Young Republicans for organizing this protest. I want to thank the press who are here today to cover this protest and allow me to speak and spread my word.
Anyway, that gives you an example there of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was ridiculed by AOC later for this as she was heckled on her way out. We'll keep looking for more clips as we wait in this hallway shot here.
With this case, John, and we'll see if we hear from the former president here. He doesn't like to walk by cameras and not say something. So we'll see if he's in that mood today, but we do expect this is going to get underway very shortly, John.
Let's go ahead and bring in Harold Ford Jr. He's co-host of The Five, also a former Democratic Tennessee congressman. Harold, interestingly, Adam Kinzinger said a moment ago this. He writes, America faces great political polarization, and this indictment will not help, but upholding the rule of law is imperative to our nation's long-term success. What do you say about that?
He could be right. I, like you, am waiting to see what's in this indictment, what the facts are that support it. I think Jonathan has said, Professor Turley has said well. And again, I've urged everyone to show some restraint here. I think some of the speculation could be—
That's their beeping.
Some of it could be wrong, but we'll know here in a few minutes. I do think the great gift that we all as Americans have is that we're presumed innocent until and unless we're proven guilty. And we must all remember that former President Trump, who has been indicted, is presumed innocent until facts are presented and evidence are presented that prove otherwise. And hopefully we learn in this indictment what the at least skeletal evidentiary claims are that the district attorney has. I would also remind everyone that most district attorneys in this country are elected. So they all run on a platform. So I don't take the idea that he ran on a platform of prosecuting former President Trump as anything other than something that DAs do when they run all across the country. Having said that, he best have a case, because if the DA does
that's a good point here. I mean, in fairness, all DAs run on some kind of, I'm going to do this. This is going to be my goal. But Letitia James and Alvin Bragg ran on the premise of, we're going to get Trump. We are going to prosecute Trump. And that kind of makes it feel like, what did you string together here? That's why everybody's so excited, waiting to see what ends up happening here. That's exactly what we're standing by for, is to see Trump walk by into the courtroom here. Court proceedings were supposed to begin about 7 minutes ago. We don't know if the bookings are taking longer. We don't know. Waiting for the indictment. Maybe the judge isn't ready yet. We'll see. Let's keep listening in here. Who knows? Maybe it's already going on. Let's keep listening in. They didn't allow cameras inside the courtroom, so this is what we get.
The president's prominence as a public figure, can that happen in America?
Of course it can. I think anyone that tries to besmirch the idea that we have one system of justice doesn't understand our judicial system. Even in our judicial system, we have checks and balances. So if something happens at a lower court that people believe, lawyers believe, there was a violation of someone's rights, they can appeal. They can appeal all the way up to a Supreme Court at the state level, or obviously at the federal level. So I'm not one who believes that anyone is above the law, nor am I one that believes that anyone should be targeted by the law. And to your question, John, I'm not a believer that no one is no one is so important, or that no one is so supersedes humanity that the legal system can't treat them fairly. If DA Bragg does not have the evidence, does not have the facts, President Trump will, if he goes to trial, will be acquitted. And if there's not evidence to support the kinds of claims that we're all speculating might be in this indictment, then a judge will likely dismiss this. But like many, I'm going to wait to see what's in the indictment before I comment much more on what may happen or what may not happen.
Let's bring back in Brett Baer for a moment here. As this is unfolding, Brett, last night we learned that special counsel Jack Smith, who's managing the classified documents case, discovered new evidence pointing to Trump's obstruction. Reports are that he has new witness statements, security camera footage, and some other kind of documentary evidence that speaks to the idea that Trump himself tampered with classified documents in his home in Mar-a-Lago after the archives requested that he return those documents to them.
Right, and that's the reporting after the subpoena. We also at Fox.
Let's hop on over here for a moment.
So there's a lot they know that we don't, and so we hope to hear a heck of a lot more at 3:30 from Mr. Bragg. And when we see that document to sort of outline,
that's the press conference, by the way, the Bragg press conference at in about 1 hour.
Brought forward here, but he is a cautious, careful man in something like this.
I do wonder if we will hear from him, though, Jonathan. The way that you describe it is he's not going to get into things that are extraneous, if you will. I mean, the very real threats against him, the threats that he has received. And this ties into something we were talking about with Kristen Welker as well on the speech tonight that Donald Trump will give at Mar-a-Lago. He has attacked the judge presiding this case, as we've discussed, as somebody who he says hates Donald Trump. Will he go after the judge again tonight? That is legally perilous for him. And there's a question on how much or if, right, the judge will address that in this arraignment here in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, just a reminder what he said earlier in that Truth Social post, talking about his desire to go to a different venue, to Staten Island as opposed to Manhattan, very unfair venue. But he talks about the highly partisan judge and his family as well-known Trump haters. I guess what you're saying, it's hard to imagine him backing off that kind of a language here on the same day as the indictment.
But what if he's warned by the judge, knock it off, essentially, right? I mean, then how does he, it's tough to tell Donald Trump.
Highly doubt that. Highly doubt this judge wants to come across as any more potentially politically divisive than this situation already is. The judge has to appear impartial. You already got the judge's daughter who worked as a campaign strategist potentially for Democrats. Adam Schiff, who's part of a Democrat part of the indictment, as with most Democrats in the House of Representatives. And then, of course, now it's coming out that the daughter of the judge potentially also worked on the campaign for Biden-Harris. So the hush, this sort of idea of gagging Trump, I highly doubt is going to go anywhere.
Show a few days ago.
It would just embolden Trump, and he would just speak through his children, essentially. There's no way you can silence a political candidate as they're going through an election cycle. There's no way. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's the greater conspiracy here is gag order Trump and make it so he can't talk. And now all of a sudden at all his campaign rallies, he can't talk about this. I don't see that happening.
I want to ask Andy about this, whether or not he does actually have the right after being president to look through potential classified documents unless he has previously declassified them. But he maintained that he had previously declassified them. So that's an argument that we could take up in a few moments. But again, I was just advised that the former president is heading up to the courtroom now. So any moment now, Jillian, we should see him come through those doors.
All right, Trump's heading up to the courtroom now. Jack, go ahead, show your goal to Steve. I don't know, Jack's really happy to show it, but do it fast.
Okay, so Steve, I would just, because you keep talking about gold, I just wanted to show you that I have a piece of gold right here. I don't know if you can see it.
All right, Jack, I got to go back to this.
That he wanted to address the events.
Jack's really excited about gold because it's been rallying the last few days since about actually like 2.5 weeks.
Right now, they are on the way in, which means that he will be right behind them, I would imagine.
All right, here we go. Here we go. We're going to see Donald Trump now. Just listen to that.
So let's not forget that Alvin Bragg, not only is he setting precedent for bringing criminal charges for the very first time in this nation's history against a former president, but he's taking a case. And this is the hush money that was paid to Stormy Daniels back in 2016, just before the election. He's taking a case that the feds said they wouldn't prosecute. Here comes the former president. Let's just listen into this.
That's Donald Trump. Nobody held the door for him.
Will you come speak to us, President Trump?
Yeah. And he went right into the courtroom. We thought that he was going to come up to that camera, but change of plans to what we had been advised. And he just walked straight in there. So again.
Yeah, let's watch that again right here. Watch that again.
President Trump, will you come speak to us, President Trump?
Look at that. Very, very serious. Interesting. Nobody held the door for him. I'm surprised by it.
As lawyers, we saw Joe Tacopina walk in, and here is the former president. There he is.
President Trump, will you come speak to us, President Trump?
Very, very serious, stern here. Doesn't look too happy, I have to say. I'm really curious now what's in this indictment. There was no indication here of any, this is potentially okay, we got this. This felt a little bit
the lead.
Yeah, that's kind of the reaction here. This looks shocked, unfortunately. Like none of these reactions here look very happy. And no door held there. Trump sort of looking down at the ground past everyone here, where to go. Brief kind of stare here that you get at the cameras, really an emotionless stare, and walk into the courtroom. Very interesting. We don't know if he's had the indictment yet, so we'll have to keep listening here.
I mean, this is a moment that no doubt is having a heavy weight on him. We know from everything he has said, he feels unjustly arrested in this case, and he will have his moment to speak. He's going to speak tonight at 8 o'clock from Mar-a-Lago. As Andy McCarthy made clear, he will be released on his own recognizance after this process that's underway now. And we're about to find out the indictments that are part of this case and how many of them are felonies. But I think that
the weight of this moment appeared to be on the former president in a very significant way, as we just saw him walk through that hallway, John.
Yeah, some of the comments here. That's a deer in the headlights look. We've got. Let's see here. Okay, some other comments here. Let's keep going.
Early part of that hour, he declined to speak right now, which we thought he may. The reality here is that if a gag order does come down during this arraignment, the president might not be able to speak at all from inside the courtroom.
Yeah, Jillian, that's a good question. I think it's something that we have not heard yet, and there's no indication yet that the judge is going to install that gag order, but we'll know shortly. I just want to go back to that image of former President Trump walking out and kind of glaring at the reporters as they said, "Will you come talk to us?" And that moment of walking into the courtroom, you know, he is standing across from the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, who's bringing forward this indictment and these charges. And, you know, this is a surreal moment, a surreal image that we'll see from inside the courtroom in those still photographs, as John mentioned. Politically, we talk a lot about politics, but this is, personal. And this is dealing with, and the photographers are now coming out after having what's called a spray of a photograph. We assume they got a couple of shots of the beginning of that proceeding. It is personal for this president who hasn't faced this. He's been probably 4 or 5 decades under investigation or attack in one way or another before, when he was a businessman, and then when he was president. Now he faces a number of serious investigations. And as we've been talking about, we just don't know because we haven't seen the indictment. But this seems the least serious of the possible charges. But it is still in a courtroom, and it does face a criminal penalty. So this is a surreal moment, and one that politically in the short term is probably beneficial for stirring up his base. But in the long term, a lot of people question how much this benefits him in the long term, unless everything can turn around and he can wipe it all clean.
So let's bring in the constitutional law expert to deal with a state court issue here. Jonathan Turley, how long do you expect that this arraignment will last? I've seen them be very short. I've seen them take 20 minutes or more.
Yeah, this should be very short. The question is, if we're going to read all 34 counts has been reported, that can take time, but you can also waive that, and it can be extremely short. So he could come out at any time.
The shorter this is that Donald Trump is in there, in theory, the shorter the list of indicted potential crimes are, right? Really, if this goes quick, that means the Trump team did not end up taking a recess to review the charges before deciding what kind of plea to enter. Obviously, we expect that plea to be a not guilty plea. However, they do have the right to request time to review the charges before entering a plea. And it does not look like we have any kind of, I suppose we'll see. We have no indication yet of what exactly is on the indictment. And we're waiting to see just that, as well as how long this process actually takes, potentially giving us a hint here. Trump now in courtroom for arraignment, charges to be unsealed momentarily. Let's stand by.
Michael Cohen saying that he believes that there are other crimes here and a lot of new evidence people don't know of. We also have a leak that occurred, which is a very serious matter, saying that these are 34 counts, including at least one felony. But we really, the key here, and the devil as always, is in the details. What are those counts? Are they all 2016 payments dealing with McDougal and Daniels? Or did they find other business or tax-related issues that they can charge? That's going to be the test of history for both Trump and Bragg as we look at the weight of this prosecution. Now, he obviously has 3 torpedoes in the water. One hit, which is this Manhattan
remember, no mugshot.
Georgia, coming out of Fulton County. I have some question about that case, if it's based entirely on a conversation he had to, quote, find additional votes. If it's based entirely...
Keep in mind, Donald Trump, no mugshot. There are going to be these AI images like this on screen now. They're fake. Jack thinks they're funny because they look ridiculous. But anyway, yes, they're fake. No mugshot for Donald Trump.
Up front. But then finally, you've got that third torpedo, the one that I think is the most serious. And that's coming out of Mar-a-Lago. I don't see a really strong case yet coming out of January 6th. But Mar-a-Lago, the FBI has said from the earliest filings that they believe they have evidence of obstruction, that there was an effort to obstruct their effort to collect these classified documents. That is a very well-trod area of law for the Department of Justice. I think that's the one that represents the most serious threat.
Let's circle back to politics once again, Brett. The former president, is in the middle of a primary campaign right now. Do you think that registered Republicans are going to be focused on the treatment of Trump or the perceived mistreatment of Trump in a few months when they head to the polls? Or is this going to be a distant memory?
This may stretch out for some time. I don't think it's going to, and Jonathan and Andy and others will tell you some of these cases may take a while. Others will fast track, but we're looking at probably a first debate in August of this year. You're looking at the polls now where the president's up 30 points in most polls over his nearest challenger, which is someone who's not yet in the race, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Okay, this is a good one. This is a screenshot of obviously fake, but of Donald Trump's fingerprints. Look at Donald Trump's fingerprints for his arrest. Again, fake news. But I have to say it's pretty funny.
Trump documents case in Mar-a-Lago and the election interference case in Georgia. But I will say that it will be an issue if it's still a big part of what he has to deal with once you get into the heart of the campaign. He will say it's all political, and he will likely get some support, a lot of support for that. But there will be other people who run against him saying the country needs to turn the page, and we'll see how powerful that is at that point.
All right. And let me circle back now that the former president has gone into the courtroom with Andy McCarthy on this issue of the documents and whether the former president had the legal right to.
I suspect they may have just gotten a heads up in terms of how many more minutes until Trump comes out. The officer there on the right started getting a little bit more agitated. Now they're rearranging things here.
He said to Sean Hannity, I have the right.
Are they going to move the press up for a statement?
The problem, John, is that his right to look at them or not look at them is really not what the material issue is there. The problem he has is that the grand jury issued a subpoena, or the Justice Department did on behalf of the grand jury, demanding that they surrender all of the documents that had classified markings that were in former President Trump's possession in Mar-a-Lago. In early June, 2 of his lawyers met with a Justice Department official and 3 FBI agents, gave them a package of about 38 documents with classified markings and a sworn statement that said they had done a diligent search and that there were no other documents left at Mar-a-Lago. So the issue is, if he was looking through boxes and looking through documents after that, it's not a question of whether he had a right to look at them or not because they were classified. It's a question of whether they intentionally misled the grand jury when they told them they had looked through Mar-a-Lago and that they were presenting to the government all of the documents that were present at Mar-a-Lago that had classified markings.
Right. So I guess the issue then is that if he was able to look through documents after they had surrendered the documents and said they had given up all the documents, that would be a clear indication in my layman's mind that there were still documents that had yet to be turned over.
Precisely. That's exactly what the issue is.
Andy, would it matter if those documents were considered totally declassified at the time he, quote, looked at them, as he claims, or does that not matter either?
Yeah, Jillian, that's a much misunderstood part of all this. The Espionage Act does not refer to classified documents. It refers to national defense information.
Okay, take a look on screen here. First potential image here coming out of the Trump arraignment underway. It looks like CNN got these. Let's jump to CNN quickly. See if we're seeing more pictures of this. Yeah, here, this is what they're showing.
He's
fully out of control.
David Urban, what are your thoughts when you look at this picture?
Yeah, I mean, Jake, kind of to echo what Alyssa says, I've seen the president look that way during debates, contemplative, but clearly this is a situation he's never been in before. He's currently in custody as he sits there at that table. No, Boris isn't there. Boris Epstein, Jason Miller, no campaign people. These are criminal defense lawyers there, fighting for his liberty. To put not too fine a point on it, and obviously I'm sure he's thinking about it, right? It's not something he would take lightly, and the president is a student of theater and history, and this is bad theater by any way, shape, or form for him. It's not the pomp and circumstance of the State of the Union address or a big rally. This is kind of small ball.
Let's jump back.
Big career decision to leave his
now Fox has
law firm, at least temporarily, to defend the former president. Susan Nichelis is there beside him, in between him and the former president, and then Joe Tacopina on the right-hand side. So there is our one and only photograph from the courtroom. And Brett, let's go to you. What kind of impact does that have on this presidential candidate, seeing that photograph? Looks pretty benign to me.
Yeah, pretty benign. I think, you can make a lot out of the moment, and it just being a moment of a former president, the first time in a courtroom facing an indictment. It is not a mugshot. I think there was some thought that a mugshot could be used two ways, by his supporters and on T-shirts and mugs and everything else to back up this president. I think that's what, his supporters look at this as a political prosecution, and one in which really rallies a lot of people about two systems of justice. That's what they talk about. The people who are backing District Attorney Bragg say, no one's above the law, and they're moving forward with these charges, and he will face his day in court, and he's innocent until proven guilty. I think they're on both sides of the political spectrum, people who go over the edge. This is a moment. And
this one's zoomed out a little more. Let's look at this one.
These charges, which we should hopefully know here what the specifics of them are in the next couple of minutes.
Kristen Welker, you're looking at these photos along with us. You've covered this president. Give us your thoughts.
I think it's interesting, by the way, that you have officers behind Trump and not Secret Service immediately in his circle here.
I think in Mr. Trump's face, and as I was saying earlier, one of his advisors said that from the view inside Trump world, these next few days are going to hurt. Well, you can see that playing out. I think that this is a heavy moment. It strikes me that we are standing here next to hundreds of protesters, Lester, but from the moment that the former president walked in to face this indictment, I have to tell you, it's been quite quiet outside of the courthouse. It's been somber, and I think that reflects.
We've got a comment here. How in the world would Dems think this would hurt Trump? Well, I think people believe that Trump might actually end up in jail as a result of these allegations and a conviction, right? Excuse me. Bad timing. And that would somehow potentially discredit Trump's or prevent Donald Trump's opinion or ability to actually campaign and to actually become president, therefore, again, because potentially he'd be serving a sentence. I think that is the belief. I think that is something that is unrealistic to believe will actually happen. And so I agree. I think the reverse is actually happening, and this is actually quite useful for Trump's fundraising. This is the most media attention he's gotten really since probably Jan 6th. I don't remember streaming for hours about Donald Trump since Jan 6th, other than maybe Georgia, although I think that was even before that. So anyway, let's keep listening here.
By the former president and by his supporters. But again, I think you see in Mr. Trump's face, in those who are sitting around him, the weight and the gravity of this moment that has ripple effects across this entire country.
All right, Kristen, thanks. Do we have Chuck Rosenberg? Yep. I wanted to bring Chuck, if I can bring you into the conversation as we await the ending of this arraignment and the first bit of information.
On this idea of a motion
Sorry.
to dismiss,
Jack,
any
Jack.
defense attorney worth their salt always introduces.
Sorry, guys. Jack did that. Jack, you got to apologize.
I expect that that's not something that the judge would grant. And then back to something that we talked about a while ago, but
It's literally the worst button he could have pushed.
because the former president is arguing that this is not a fair venue to him, that the judge has bias against him, that the prosecutor has bias against him, and that the entire borough of Manhattan has bias against him. What do you say?
Well, I think what will happen today, John, is that there'll be nothing more than a scheduling done for all of these kinds of pretrial relief, pretrial motions that will be made. I don't have a lot of confidence that they'll get a venue change here, and I don't have a lot of confidence.
Why are they talking about a venue change on Fox? He's already at the venue. I understand thinking maybe for the rest of the proceedings. No way, man. No chance venue change. Not a chance. Alvin Bragg wants this in his court.
And the judge orders the court officers to remove the handcuffs, and then when the hearing's over, to replace the handcuffs if the defendant isn't being released. So that's their normal place. What's remarkable about it is that standing in front of them in the defendant is not somebody that they had to uncuff or will probably have to recuff, but it's the first time Donald Trump has probably ever been more than 4 feet from a Secret Service agent from his security detail. But right now, he is in the custody of the Manhattan DA, under the control of these court officers, and under the control of the decision that this judge makes while we're sitting here talking in the next few minutes.
Yep, that's very true. Also, a comment here from Joe Miami. Political persecution works both ways. The people in power today will not be the people in power tomorrow. The corrupt DA who ran on arresting Trump using charges the feds refused to prosecute will backfire on Democrats in 2024.
A more chastened Donald Trump.
Yeah, interestingly, if you go back to that wide shot again, Jake, at the counsel's table, Boris Epstein's sitting there. And so I'm wondering if he is, Ellie, if he's registered as counsel.
Okay, Trump has now officially pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Not guilty plea is in. That's officially now in. 34 counts of not. This is what Yahoo leaked yesterday. It is a not guilty plea to 34 felony counts.
Go back to that picture. It is notable that Blanche, sitting closest to the camera, was just added to the case. But in order to be added, he had to leave his law firm. And it's a very sad moment. If he left his law firm, because the firm did not want to have a partner representing a former president of the United States. We have seen a great backlash against firms that have represented Republicans or represented Donald Trump. And that itself really slaps at the underlying principles of our legal system. He should not have to resign from a firm to represent a former president of the United States. But that's the age of rage that we live in. So all
right, let's pull off this one. Let's go to a different.
Criminal cases are different things, right? They have their own life cycle, and you can't continuously delay, particularly if you have a good judge presiding, as we apparently have with Judge Merchan. So I'm not sure that the prosecutors ought to look at Mr. Trump's history in the civil litigation realm and draw much from it, one way or the other, because
we should be getting the full indictment of 34 counts very soon.
Than living in a civil case.
All right, I want to go right to Kristen Welker outside the courtroom. We are getting word now of that indictment that has been unsealed. Kristen, what can you tell us?
Lester, I'm just going to read this note that we just got from Adam Reese, who is inside the courthouse. Let me read it to you. Former President Trump pleads not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records related to hush money payments in the 2016. Former President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty in a Manhattan courtroom, again, to 34 counts of falsifying business records and conspiracy for his alleged role in hush money payments to 2 women toward the end of his 2016 presidential campaign. The indictment, the first against a former president, was unsealed in a brief proceeding before Judge Merchan. So again, Lester, Mr. Trump pleading not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying.
That's probably including McDougal now.
Obviously, Laura and Danny will have the ins and outs of what this means.
Playboy model.
This is significant, this is historic, and it is unprecedented. And we now know that Mr. Trump has seen the charges against him, and he has pleaded not guilty, Lester.
It doesn't sound like they have anything beyond just hush money payment, falsification of documents here.
Conspiracy is a very effective tool used by prosecutors to charge groups of people and hold them accountable for all acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. But the big question now arises, who is the conspiracy with? Because a conspiracy involves two or more people who agree to engage in some kind of criminal act, some unlawful objective. If you were betting, the most likely co-conspirator might be Michael Cohen, who's not charged in this indictment, but he might be one of the alleged co-conspirators. We don't know yet, but it could also be a signal that maybe the DA didn't use federal election law as that predicate to boost this case from misdemeanor land up to a felony. Just as a quick recap, the falsification of business records statute in New York.
Let's jump on over here again.
Was trying to conceal, which is what makes it a felony. It was always the fact that he's using the grand jury indicated that he was pursuing felony charges. I presume he could have filed a criminal information without the grand jury. Bragg could have by himself had there not been felony charges. Difficult to make a judgment without having read it, but I would just say if it's based on what we already knew, I think, Trey Gowdy talked before about count stacking, which is the kind of thing the Justice Department actually has guidance telling federal prosecutors not to take a case where you have thin evidence and try to camouflage with quantity of charges what you lack in quality of evidence. And what I fear here is that they've taken what's essentially one transaction and figured out ways to compartmentalize pieces of it. So, for example, if you have one payment to Michael Cohen where he put in an invoice, they gave him a check, and then they made a business record entry, you could turn that into 3 counts, even though it's one transaction. And the whole thing is only one transaction because it's repayment for a debt. So I fear that what's happened here is that they have done exactly what the Justice Department warns abusive prosecutors not to do, which is take something that is a single unitary transaction and turn it into multiple transactions in order to create the impression that the defendant is a serious offender.
Let me just read the statute here in terms of the charges against the former president. According to New York state law, section 175.10, a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the first degree when he commits the crime of falsifying business records in the second degree, and when his intent to defraud includes, as you were mentioning, Andy, an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof. So, Jonathan Turley, I take it that the inference here is that the financial crime was meant to was done in such a way to conceal a crime of an illegal campaign contribution. Is that where we're going here?
Well, quickly, Elon Musk just tweeted, if Democratic Party had a time machine, he shows this image here. If the Democratic Party had a time machine, why do time travelers keep trying to kill me? I'm just a realtor. In other words, making the allegation that if Democrats had a time machine, they would go back in time and try to eliminate Trump so that he could never run for president. Keep in mind, Elon Musk has also been very vocal about the potential for Donald Trump winning in a landslide if he's actually placed into handcuffs. Let's keep listening here.
2016, then we will know those are related to Daniels and McDougal. If that's the case, then this would be a terrible moment for the rule of law. This would mean that all Bragg did was replicate the same flawed theory 34 times.
Yeah, this Fox argument here is true. I mean, if he's taking the same case and expanding it 34 times, it just makes it seem even more ridiculous, right? It's like, really, the same thing 34 times?
Many of us don't believe this is an election violation, that you could count this as a political contribution. Even people at the FEC rejected that argument. But also the Department of Justice went down.
I mean, quite frankly, having somebody sign an NDA to not badmouth your campaign could kind of be argued a pretty reasonable campaign expense. I mean, I don't know. Maybe somebody can give me some counter ammunition on that. But like, to protect your brand and paying somebody to sign an NDA is not unusual, right? I mean, that's what people do when somebody gets fired. They're like, look, I'll pay you money, but sign this NDA, right? That's very typical. Or like, hey, look, we've got some stuff that's going to come out. And somebody says, hey, can we settle this, right? I don't know that that's necessarily a crime. So that's an interesting point they bring up. I guess it hasn't been something we've really heard much talk about. Is it actually wrong to pay someone to sign an NDA? I mean, if both sides are agreeing to it, it's not extortion if somebody's doing it willingly, right? I don't know. That's very interesting.
Candidates, presidential candidates, including Hillary Clinton, have paid financial penalties for campaign finance violations. Is embedded within these charges, again, we have not seen them yet, but we are getting early reports about them. Can we now assume safely that Bragg is making, and the grand jury is making the case in these charges, that Trump did have the intent to defraud American voters? That is definitively what they are charging him with here? Is that what differentiates this?
Yeah, I don't think we can make that assumption until we read the indictment and see what it was that he was allegedly trying to conceal. What was that other crime? We've only heard of one in all of these leaks and discussions, and that's the federal election violation. That would be
But can
really
we assume that that is the
problematic
case that Bragg and the grand jurors are trying to make? We know that now, right?
Well, all we know is that the initial description of the indictment would fit that profile, but we don't have confirmation of what that second crime is. The concern about the grand jury, by the way, is that
the second crime seems to have to do with the hush money payments to McDougal, which is the Playboy actor, porn star. So really now you have the same sort of crime against two people, but is it a crime? I don't know. We'll find out.
Consistent with.
Be nice to see the evidence. Jack wants to say goodbye. Jack, say goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging out, dude, and thanks for bringing me coffee.
Violation into a felony in the first degree by alleging an effort to conceal a federal election violation. But we need to still confirm that it's consistent, but it's not conclusive.
Again, the proceedings underway here. They probably will be wrapping up soon. We may hear from the president on his way out. We were told that he wanted to talk going in and coming out. He didn't talk on the way in, so it could be that he talks on the way out. We're going to be handing over to Martha McCallum in just a little more than a minute. Andy McCarthy, give me 30 seconds, wrap up on your thoughts so far.
Yeah, I'd just like to respond to one thing Jillian just raised. Even if they regarded this as a campaign violation, even if the campaign did, even if everybody agreed that it was, which it wasn't, the non-disclosure agreement was days before the 2016 election. They would not have had to report this until well into 2017. So the idea that he defrauded the American people into electing him just doesn't hold up tenably in terms of what the timeline was.
Interesting. Brett, before we're out of time here, I want to make sure that we get your final thoughts on what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think we'll finally have all the details very shortly, but you're looking at counts that include this falsifying business records and a conspiracy count. It looks like it covers Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal and this federal election law. I think we're going to get all the details very shortly, but you see the former president there pleading not guilty, and he'll definitely have something to say shortly.
Yeah, there may also be some breaking news from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals regarding an order for Stormy Daniels to repay attorney fees to the former president. So we'll see how that goes. All right.
Keep in mind, McDougal, the porn star who worked for Playboy, was apparently a multi What do we have here? Let's see. This is a New Yorker has a piece on this. Let's just pull this up really quick. Let's see here. Playboy Mansion. The Apprentice was brought there through a pool party for contestants, including Karen McDougal, Playmate of the Year 8 years earlier. The magazine's readers voted her runner-up for Playmate of the 90s behind Pamela Anderson. Trump had been married for less than 2 years to Melania, and Trump seemed uninhibited by his new family obligations. And then there's some discussions here basically documenting this affair and how the Trump team would use various different hotel rooms to orchestrate hush money payments. The affair was described as consensual, very similar to the story that we had from Stormy Daniels, which obviously is her stage name. And some more information here. Okay, let's go back to the coverage here.
Under arrest and now being charged with 34 counts of felonies. Former Attorney General Bill Barr is standing by with us. Britt Hume is also here to weigh in momentarily. First, we go to national correspondent Brian Yennis, who is live at the courthouse where we expect shortly the president will be exiting soon. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Martha. Well, that's exactly right. There are two big questions right now ahead of us. One, when will the former president come out? It should be at any moment. And will he say anything to the cameras? He did not say anything walking into court.
Here, by the way, are some photos of Karen McDougal. Anyway, yeah.
We know the indictment was unsealed, but at this point, it's about the press, all of us in the world getting a hold of it. We have many members of the press who are inside of that courtroom, but they were barred from having their phones and their laptops on. So that is why there is somewhat of a delay for us to understand the full extent of this indictment and the charges. So
Donald Trump NFT sales, according to the Dow Jones, up 251% following his arraignment. I'm not a big fan of percentages like that because you could take a percentage. You could take one sale and it goes to 2 when it's up 100%, right? It goes to 3, it's up 200%. The NFT sales, that was a joke.
This is in violation of section 175.10 in the New York State Code. It's falsifying business records is a felony in the first degree when someone commits the crime of falsifying business records in the second degree with the intent to defraud. And it also includes an intent to commit another crime. And this on its surface is not a surprise to all of us who have been following this in the sense this is what we had expected. These types of charges. At this point, it's about the underlying details. Is this about the former adult film star Stormy Daniels? Is this about the former Playboy model Karen McDougal? We'll find that out shortly. But as of now,
it was an alleged 9-month affair, by the way.
And when he comes out, we shall. Hopefully, we'll hear from the former president. He'll walk out of the courthouse. We expected that to be about now, but they did start a little delayed. And at that moment, we will then hear from the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, who has a press conference in your hour, Martha. And we'll be hearing more about what he has to say about the charges. Martha.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we're all going to be watching that with great interest here together. Let's start with bringing in Fox News chief political analyst Britt Hume. Britt, your thoughts as we watch all of this playing out in this New York courtroom this afternoon, sir?
Well, Martha, put yourself in the position of an American citizen watching this, someone not dedicated to Trump nor a Trump hater, worried about the world, worried about Russia and China becoming more united, worried about the stalemate in Ukraine, worried about inflation and the possibility of recession in this country, worried about the lawlessness at the border and the lawlessness on our streets. And he looks at this and he says, well, we're going to have an election in a couple of years. Who are we going to get? Well, Joe Biden is apparently going to run again. He's the person under whose watch these circumstances I just described arose. He's also going to be, 82 years old when Election Day rolls around. Many people think he's too old, that he's senescent, if not utterly senile. And on the other hand, the prospect seems to be clear now that we'll have Donald Trump again, a man who today stands indicted and arraigned in a court in New York City.
By the way, I think it's interesting here. You've got Karen McDougal actually filed a lawsuit against Tucker Carlson December 5th of 2019. Tucker Carlson alleged that Karen McDougal extorted Donald Trump for hush money payments. And a Trump-appointed judge in Manhattan dismissed the case, calling it exaggeration, rhetorical hyperbole, and opinion commentary intended to frame a debate. Well, I know there are a lot of Democrats just shaking their head right now going, this guy gets it. Always, man. Somehow, Teflon Don.
People as they watch this.
Well, I must say I was struck by I guess it was a CNN poll in the last couple of days, in which a distinct minority, 37%, thought there was that a crime was involved here, but 60% were in support of the indictment, which means that an awful lot of people that don't think he did anything were happy to see him pursued anyway. That's a little disturbing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would. I would. And we've seen those numbers. And when you have a majority of people who say they think that the motivation is political, but they'd like to see the person indicted anyway, I think it puts a fine point, Britt, on what we've seen happen in this country, just very intense division across this country over the last 6 years or so. And, I just wonder if it's responsible to take this action that we're seeing happen in New York. And we know we're going to go down this road several more times in Georgia and in this special counsel's investigation as well.
Yeah, and you have to wonder whether not just this case, but any of the cases being contemplated really rise to the level that would mean that they're necessary to bring in light of.
We're going to switch for a moment. Let's try to give the other side a little bit of airtime.
Or an indictment to go from being unsealed to posted online, especially when you have something that is of such public interest internationally.
It's surprising to me. I mean, in some of the more high-profile cases that were handled when I was there, and I know Karen can also share this experience. You have it sort of teed up and ready to go. You have to wait for the unsealing at the arraignment, but you also have someone sort of standing by to feed that indictment out because the media is waiting for it. So I'm a little surprised that we're not seeing it yet.
Interesting. Andy McCabe, any thoughts and reactions to this? The images we're getting from inside this courtroom are just extraordinary. The annoyed, chastened Donald Trump, the reports that he has pleaded not guilty to 34 charges. We're still waiting, of course, to hear what they are.
Still waiting to hear what they are, and I would say still waiting to understand what exactly is still taking place in that courtroom, because as others have mentioned, this has really gone on at least twice as long as any of us expected. My guess, and this is speculation,
that's what she said.
The battling over issues and motions and scheduling has probably already begun. One of the goals that the judge will have had in this first arraignment would be to set up at least a provisional schedule of when those motions would be due. So you can imagine we've already heard reporting from the Trump legal team that they intend to fight. I think they said every issue related to this case. And my guess is that those battles have probably already begun behind the closed doors in 100 Center Street.
Carrie Cordero, let me ask you, the Trump defense team has already signaled that they are immediately going to make a motion to have this case dismissed, that they think it's nonsense, that they don't think these charges hold water, that it's misdemeanors, et cetera. Would they make that motion at this court appearance, or would it be for a later appearance?
Normally, I think they would take more time to be able to actually write out their motions. I mean, they could have started drafting it based on what they think was coming, but they got to really be able to look at the document. So I don't think they would make a motion to dismiss orally in front of the judge because they want to make every single possible written argument that they can in their brief. But I would expect that they would do it relatively soon. I don't think it would be during this proceeding, but soon.
And Karen, let me ask you, because one of the speculations, and obviously we're going to get an answer to all of this as soon as the Manhattan District Attorney posts the indictment. But one of the speculations is that the felony count will come from the idea that this business fraud was committed in the name of hiding another crime.
By the way, here is a fake mugshot that Donald Trump and the Trump team are now using to potentially fundraise for the campaign. Obviously, fundraising, very big deal here for the Trump campaign. This is probably some of the most media attention that they might get, quite frankly, all campaign, and until it really becomes go time. I personally preferred this fake picture here, this AI generated shot. I thought that one was pretty funny. But anyway, all right, let's keep going over here.
Which is the lowest felony there is in New York State, but it's very, very common. And the question's going to be, what is the charge that brings the falsifying a business record from the misdemeanor to a felony? The misdemeanor falsifying a business record is just when you, with the intent to deceive, you enter a false or erroneous record. You make a record entry that is false or erroneous in some way with the intent to deceive someone. What makes it a felony is when you make that erroneous entry and your intent to deceive includes the commission or concealment of another crime. And there's been a lot of speculation about what's appropriate and what could that other crime be. And that's going to be the thing that I think most legal analysts are waiting to see if we get any indication of that from the unsealing of the indictment, because we might not know which crime they relied upon or crimes, because it could be multiple. They could have multiple theories of what the crimes are that they're thinking about. It also doesn't say in the statute whose crime you are intending to conceal or commit. It could be, for example, that the falsification was made in furtherance of the charges by Michael Cohen, who was already prosecuted and pled guilty in 2018 federally for this exact charge. So we just don't know what the crime will be that the district attorney used to elevate it to a felony. And again, there's been a lot of question about, is it okay to use a federal election law violation as the crime that makes this a felony? And that's going to be one of the legal arguments, I think, that that the lawyers are going to make in this case, because that is something that, although it's been done many times, or several times, I should say, before, it's not ever been tested or litigated in court.
And also the idea, Karen, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but the idea that this alleged campaign finance falsification that the business fraud would have been covering up, the hush money payment in 2016, that normally the statute of limitation, this is what I've been told is the theory, would have run out. But because Donald Trump was in Washington, D.C. for 4 years and then has been in Florida since leaving the White House.
Jacob Smith, can you share some insight onto that? You're saying, so is this something you're assuming, a doctored NDA that was edited in 34 places, one felony predicate? I mean, this is regarding two different women now.
He was outside the jurisdiction continuously when he was in Washington. And don't forget, he also moved his residence from New York to Florida. The governor of New York during the COVID pandemic pressed pause on the statute of limitations for a period of time for all cases, for all criminal cases in New York. And that pause was for more than a year. So that is going to be another tolling, is what they call it, of the statute of limitations that the prosecution will rely upon here.
So Governor Cuomo put pause on that for how long?
So that it's unclear, because there were some that it was renewed and then it was stopped a couple of times. But I assure you that the lawyers at the Manhattan DA's office,
Pure spec. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for that.
period of time is it with respect to this particular case.
Okay. Jamie Gangel, when you're looking at these images, one of the things, by the way, David Urban was wondering about Boris.
Let's see.
And for pursuing it within the Department of Justice would be the argument, look, how can we protect all our national secrets and require that our employees and people involved in sensitive programs protect the information if we turn a blind eye to something like this? So I'm sure there's going to be some pressure to pursue that case if they have strong evidence.
So one of the things that has come up here is whether or not this judge would put a gag order in place. And we thought that the president might speak on his way into the courtroom. They were running late. He looked quite serious, as you would expect in this situation as he walked in. Do you think he will take advantage, as we've been told, of the opportunity to say something on the way out? And would you advise it?
Yeah, I think he'll take the opportunity, and I think it's fine if he does. I mean, I think it's important for him to get his message out, and I think it would be very bad to impose a gag order on him, especially in the circumstances of this case where he's a candidate in an election.
Yeah. Britt, I want to bring you back in here. Let's take a look at this exchange, Britt, and we'll cut right away from this if the former president walks out. But this is the exchange that happened in the briefing room a short time ago with New York Times reporter Michael Scher and Karine Jean-Pierre. Watch this for us.
We're just going to be very mindful. These are ongoing cases.
100 cases involving Americans whose freedom was at risk.
I hear you.
Right?
This
So-
is something that all of Americans watch in real time. In real time. And people died. People died.
I don't need a
People
lecture on
died.
the fact that
But you're lecturing
died.
me. But
what
you're
I'm-
lecturing me.
I'm not. What
Yes, you are.
I'm asking.
Oh, this is exhausting.
January 6th historic. It was absolutely historic, and none of us had ever seen that before. Nobody's seen this before either.
So this started, I should have set it up better, Britt, but it started with a question about, what their reaction was to what's happening today in the courthouse in New York. And he's making the suggestion that, you talked about January 6th and those cases all the time. Why can you not talk about this, Britt?
Well, the sad truth is that she's not the greatest spokesperson that ever lived, and she seemed unprepared for the question. I mean, I think the general policy in the White House is, as you heard President Trump say in the driveway the other day when asked a question about, whether the case against Trump was politically motivated, he said, "I have no comment on Trump." That seems to be the order of the day, and that's what his spokesperson there, the White House press secretary, was following that course. But the point is entirely correct. When it suits them politically, they'll say whatever they want to say. And this isn't the first time we've ever seen this out of a White House, but that's what's going on.
Yeah, and politically, Britt, it would seem that they are quite happy to sort of sit back and let all of this play out as the president deliberates over whether or not he's going to run again. He's probably quite happy to have the focus on this.
Yeah, and it works kind of on two levels, Martha. On the one level, the people who really dislike Donald Trump, no matter what doubts they might have or should have about the legitimacy of this indictment, the people who really hate Trump love to see the idea of him, in the dock, the humiliation of being booked and fingerprinted and arraigned and all that, even as embarrassing as that undoubtedly is for him, they love it, and they don't really seem to.
That is true. I think this is honestly more of a spectacle for that Democrats are really enjoying. And it's one that's actually emboldening the people who would vote for Trump, which is interesting because I think there's a higher likelihood that you might actually embolden a Republican to vote than you would embolden a Democrat to vote here. And elections can really be swung by that sort of emotion. So I don't see this actually being a good thing for Democrats. And I'm not suggesting it's necessarily a great thing for Trump, but it certainly drowns out people like DeSantis substantially. And that's not to say DeSantis is perfect, but I've been watching DeSantis substantially. I grew up in Florida, and I think Florida is a great state, but there have been some faux pas here. And so while Trump is getting the limelight, DeSantis has fallen on some landmines, and it's really creating this Trump versus Democrats election again.
I mean, that was expected. I mean, he's entitled to those fees. The timing, I have to say, is very curious.
And it does raise this issue of, sort of the underlying issues that we're talking about here, But
I'm afraid, this is just the beginning of 2 years where, we're going to have a lot of heavy breathing about a lot of legal developments. And it's unfortunate because it'll divert attention from the serious issues that the country face. And we have to.
It's true. Let's listen over here.
This language and behavior issue is becoming such a big part of this today.
I'm somewhat surprised.
think regarding the evidence and the discovery, I think it's often in cases like this and in other cases, judges put protective orders to prevent the defense or the prosecution from putting out that evidence as to ensure the fairness of the process and of the trial. So perhaps some sort of protective order on that evidence doesn't surprise me. What did surprise me was that Adam Reese and other reporters have been able to...
Quick comment here. What do I think about the DeSantis-Disney face-off? You know, I commented on this morning, but I'll reiterate. I think DeSantis made some big oopsies here. I think he made it clear that DeSantis was willing to weaponize, dare we borrow that word, the political office to punish a corporation for having an opinion, right? Now, that's not to say, like, I mean, is it up to a governor to say a corporation should not have an opinion, right? Some people on the left say corporations should not be punished for having an opinion. People on the right say Disney should stay out of woke politics. Okay, fine. But then DeSantis kind of bungled his response by not paying attention to the board of Disney. And basically all the restrictions that were passed against Disney found a way to get around in public hearings right before the DeSantis board took over. And now the DeSantis board is like, are you serious? We've got 21 plus years of no power. What the hell? So I think he mishandled that going in and following through with it. It's unfortunate for him because I know he was trying to use it as a political statement, but I think Disney won on that one. And I actually don't, it actually, from a Republican point of view, I think it actually makes DeSantis look slightly weaker. Because then people are going to wonder, would Donald Trump have let Disney get away with it, right? But then also from a more moderate point of view, well, is it the responsibility of the governor to censor a corporation? So I think those are very real considerations.
He did not answer anything about this or about the detained Wall Street Journal reporter, which is what reporters were asking about. There has been some chatter in town in the last couple of days about the process and about the precedent that this indictment of a former president by a local DA could set. And so that is something that we asked the press secretary about a few minutes ago. Listen here.
Is he concerned at all that a local DA indicting a former president could down the line open up the possibility, set the precedent, that local DAs that don't like former President Biden could indict him?
I'm not going to comment from here.
Why don't you have more to say about the Trump indictment?
It is an ongoing case, and I've been very clear about that. We've been prudent about that, not commenting on ongoing cases, and we're going to stick to that. Peter?
And there were some further questions after that about why they'll talk about.
Now remember, the DA is expected to speak technically in 7 minutes. Technically, the DA is expected to hold a press conference at 3:30 Eastern, likely will be delayed. I'm going to put that up. I'm also going to go to the restroom. I will still be listening, but you will not be hearing me. I will be back in just a moment.
Peter Ducey at the White House. We do have some new images to share with you from inside the courtroom. As you know,
wait, I want to see.
Cameras allowed in there. We do just have still photos of the proceedings
we saw that
here.
One.
The president just sitting.
That's just him with his eyes in slightly a different angle.
Who we mentioned before. Bill Barr, you know, you have your own experience with this president. When you look at these pictures and he has been arrested and indicted and is in this courtroom, what goes through your mind on a personal level?
Well, as people know, I've had my differences with the president, but this situation, I think, he's being unjustly treated, just as he was by the Russiagate scam and the whole idea of the resistance. So I feel bad that this has happened. I don't think it's justified. And so at that very human level, I feel bad for him.
What about these attorneys and what about the choice to bring in Todd Blanche, who people see on the left-hand side of the screen? We're getting a couple different images in here. As I said, very limited ability to take any photos in there. He left Cadwalader, his firm where he was a partner. He said he could not, something along the lines of, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to do this, to handle this. Why do you think he says that?
Because he hasn't worked with Trump before.
You
Lawyers
think he'll be sorry? Is that what you're saying?
lawyers inevitably are sorry for taking on assignments with him. They either spend a lot of time before grand juries or depositions themselves, or.
All right, we're
Yeah.
just watching him come out of the room here and back into that hallway. So this process is over. We should expect that we're going to see in detail the list of this indictment. Nothing that we've heard so far indicates that there's any big bombshell here. We were told that this was going to be very solid. We were told by Lanny Davis, Michael Cohen's attorney, that we were going to be surprised by some of what we saw here, that there were more crimes than people know in this case. So we're watching to see if we will hear from the former president as he makes his way out of the building, and we wait for this. Andy McCarthy is back with us. Andy, so we wait now for the actual text of these indictments. Your thoughts on where we are at this moment?
Well, for all the people, Martha, who said, you don't know what's in this indictment, we have to wait to see it. It's pretty.
I missed him walking out. Of course. I'm going to replay it, though. Golly.
Figuring out whether it might be easy, trying to enforce it.
Here it is.
And figuring out whether it's worth trying to enforce it.
I'm gonna interrupt you just for a second. We're seeing Donald Trump leaving the courthouse and not making any comments. There was a microphone there, and a reporter had asked earlier if he would say anything. Obviously not this hearing.
Okay, and then I think we're here now as he's leaving the building.
Another crime. I think the only sensible way that statute can be read is that another crime means another New York crime. This is from the New York Penal Code. And if that's not the way to interpret it, which is to say that another crime has to be another New York crime, and instead it opens it up to
Here's
any
the
crime,
motorcade.
then my question is, what's the limiting principle of that? They say, now they want to use it to bootstrap a federal crime in. Why not a crime against Sharia? Why not a crime against the law of Germany? It doesn't make any sense to interpret that provision any other way than to say he's got to have been trying to conceal a New York crime. So I think as a matter of law.
Oh, that's an
Greg does
interesting
not have
argument that you can't elevate it to a felony if he's not concealing a New York law potentially. Right, because remember, it's not necessarily prosecuting the other crime, the campaign finance violation. It's prosecuting the fact that there was a falsification of business records that potentially covered up another crime. Whether or not that other crime is being prosecuted or not may not matter for the elevation to felony. Here we go.
In-kind contribution. In the Edwards case, the Federal Election Commission and the Department of Justice disagreed on that question, and they're the experts here.
There we go.
So I don't think he can prove it. I don't think he gets in the door legally, and if he could get in the door, I don't think he can make the case evidence-wise.
Yeah, if that's the case, and I'm going to ask Bill Barr to weigh in too on this, Andy. If that's the case, and you're Judge Merchan, how do you allow this to go forward? If that is, if the secondary crime, which has to be in place in order to prove that there was some manipulation going on here, that you were trying to obfuscate these business records with intent to do something harmful, how can he allow it to go forward if that's the case?
Well, I was in the middle of saying why this lawyer from Cadwalader would take the case.
Yes.
And the other reason
I'm surprised Trump didn't take the opportunity to speak at all.
Be a winner. And at some point, someone will, who isn't infected by the craziness of our age, is going to come in and straighten this thing.
All right, DA expected to speak at 3:45. That's in 16 minutes.
Appellate system, and since it all turns on a federal criminal statute, I think it would ultimately come to that. So at some point, some judge is going to stand up and do what's right here.
Okay, here we go. Unsealed, potential maximum penalty of 136 years max sentence. Indictment filed against Trump, charging him with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Trump, 76, pleaded not guilty. Developing story, misdemeanor upgraded to felony if it's covering up something else. Additional information not yet available. Okay.
About the inner workings of the New York system, but or maybe
here's another shot.
team, many of whom are expected to accompany him back to Mar-a-Lago, where frankly the crowd will be, I think, friendlier than what he has seen so far in Manhattan. He's expected to be in front of supporters. It is entirely possible that we will see supporters there in West Palm and in Palm Beach lining the route that Donald Trump will come back home. I think there is another key piece of information as we talk about the politics of it that we're waiting on, which is the indictment itself and getting some of the specifics that we've been discussing here as far as the legal implications. I want to note something that Jonathan Dean's talked about, which is, again, the extraordinary security measures that have been in place, not just today for the last 6-8 hours plus in an intensive way, but frankly, Jonathan, as you've been reporting and as you were first to report a week and a half ago, that have been in place for days now.
Yeah, for about 2 weeks now, from the FBI to the court officers to the NYPD, they've all been working and preparing for this day, and this day has come. And as you can see in one of the shots before, as the president was leaving, the former president leaving the courthouse, the lines of people rose deep to get a look at this day in history. I thought that was an extraordinary sight here in Manhattan. We understood that there were going to be a few hundred protesters, pro and con, in that Foley Square area in and around the courthouse. But the fact that for several blocks leaving that 100 Center Street area, that those sidewalks were pretty jammed with people. Now you see he's approaching the entrance to the FDR Drive, which will take him north towards the Triborough Bridge and LaGuardia Airport, where his plane is waiting for him. But the former president of the United States stand accused of 34 counts of falsifying business records and conspiracy, and leaves an accused criminal. He pleaded not guilty. And just an extraordinary day, and we wait to hear more from the reporters who are in the courtroom and in the overflow rooms about exactly what went on inside during that 45-minute hearing.
Danny, what do you think his lawyers are telling him right now? Now that they see what the prosecution has put together, they're saying, don't worry, you're fine, there's no case here? Or is this the moment where you have to acknowledge that this could be a big deal?
I think what you'll find is that Donald Trump isn't as intensely involved in looking at the indictment as his lawyers are. I picture his team huddling around this indictment, parsing it out, although at this point, there can't be much that surprises them. Frankly, there can't be much that surprises.
Let's pull off this one here. Let's jump back here.
He gets back home to Florida, which is now his main residence. And Alvin Bragg is going to speak any moment now. And won't it be interesting to hear how he backs up this indictment, which Andy McCarthy and the former Attorney General Bill Barr have both basically taken a scalpel to, and say that there's not much there at all. So we'll see what Alvin Bragg, the DA, has to say about how he handles this. Do we still have Britt with us, guys? Okay. Britt, politically, we didn't hear from the president just now. We know.
Never mind. They're a little boring. Let's go back over
A lot
here.
of indictments, there isn't usually a lot of information in there that's helpful to a layperson who's trying to learn about their case, especially if it is, as I suspect it is, a bare bones indictment, not what's called a speaking indictment, where in the modern era of Adobe and Microsoft Word, people insert photographs and charts and all kinds of different things. And you do see that in the federal context. For example, they might put a chart in of all the money laundering or structuring counts or things like that. And you might see that here. You might see a chart of all the different checks, the payments, when made. You might see that in this indictment. It's possible, but it's not the kind of thing that I think Trump would even interest himself much with. He knows the basics. He knows what he's charged with. He's the kind of guy that's going to say, lawyers, you handle it until I decide that you're not handling it the way I like you to handle it, and then I'll get new lawyers in.
And we noted he expanded his legal team only as recently as yesterday. We continue to watch the former president make his way to LaGuardia Airport. Let me go to Kristen Welker, who's outside the courthouse now that convoy has cleared that area. What are you seeing?
Well, Lester, the convoy has cleared the area, but former President Trump's supporters are still here. In fact, there is a Trump sign unfurled, some of his protesters holding that. But again, this crowd is largely calm. They are somber, and I think it underscores the mixed emotions today. The fact that, yes, the former president is using this moment to strike a defiant stance, but again, this is an historic moment, the first former president to face an indictment, and his supporters, based on what I'm seeing here outside of the courthouse, really seem to understand the gravity of that, the significance of that. You talked about the fact that there is so much.
One of the things that I think is really interesting is a presidential motorcade would have so many more lead police cars than Donald Trump here has. Donald Trump, it looks like, has one lead police car, and then it's all Secret Service. Look at this on the screen there on the right. There's a school bus on the right side, a regular car on the right side. There's like no division between those other cars other than there's a cop car. Let's just slow down and wait. That's it. And then you've got all the Secret Service Tahoes or Suburbans or whatever. Very little actual leading of this a convoy by law enforcement. In other words, it's just one cop car in the front and one in the back. That's all he's getting. I don't know. I find that interesting. It's not, I mean, obviously he's an ex-president now, still respectfully considered president, but surprising how much less security you actually get. I mean, then again, he's got like 8 of these Suburbans around him. So, but anyway, I think you understand what I'm saying. The presidential convoys are a lot bigger.
Over him, that this is just the very beginning. There are several other cases in the pipeline.
Right. And that's why I don't think this is necessarily going to fade. There's going to be re-upping of this on a consistent basis, I think. And I feel bad about what's happened to the office of the president over the last few years with all this turmoil. I mean, his advisors have been ordered now to appear before the January 6th prosecutor and so forth. So the powers of the presidency have been eroded by these cases over the last few years.
That's a good point. So Mark Meadows will have to testify, Mike Pence to some degree. The vice president of the United States will also have to testify about January 6th. As you say, that's an erosion of the executive power, something that you've always spoken of very strongly in terms of the importance of preserving that. So what's lost when you have advisors who may be going to work for this president or the next president who know that they might be forced into this situation as well now as a precedent here?
Right. It'll have a tremendous chilling effect on robust conversations and give and take.
We're about 9 minutes away from the DA's conversation, or press conference rather.
So we watch as the motorcade makes its way now to LaGuardia Airport. This is all going to play out, Britt, over the course of the next several months, while the rest of us are covering this election, doing debate I mean, what's the impact of this on a debate environment? If you're on stage
here, you can see it on the screen there as we're scrolling through it.
It's
here.
automatically a felony, or only if they
escalate it, if they find a way to step it up. That's what I'm searching for now to see how they describe it. It's pretty bare bones, a lot of boilerplate language repeated for each and every count there. As I said, 34 counts falsifying business records in the first degree.
16 pages long, this indictment is. Just to give.
I see a lot of comments about his trust, his revocable trust, checks from his revocable trust.
On the air, live as we are getting it here. And it does not, I will defer to the legal experts on this, it does not appear to be that so-called speaking indictment or anything that is more further fleshed out, which means that in the next couple of minutes, when we do hear from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, that would be his opportunity to elaborate on some of what our own Adam Reese reported went down in court. Some of the description of what prosecutors think, the idea that they believe he tried to suppress information ahead of the 2016 campaign.
This, Lester, is the moment legal analysts dread, because it's when a document like this comes out. It's only 16 pages, but we're frantically going through it. We've only just gotten it, and we're getting a look at the first charges. And indeed, it is falsifying business records in the first degree of felony, and we should find out relatively soon what that predicate crime is that was used to elevate what is ordinarily a misdemeanor into felony land.
I got it. Okay, Alvin Bragg's going to be speaking shortly. Let's get through it. Grand jury of New York, by this indictment, accuses the defendant of falsifying business records in the first degree violation of Penal Code 175. That's the falsifying business record section. The defendant in the county of New York and elsewhere on about Feb 14, 2017, with the intent to defraud and intent to commit another crime and aid in the concealment and conceal the commission thereof, made and caused a false entry of business records of an enterprise, to wit, an invoice from Michael Cohen, marked as a record of Donald Trump, revocable trust, and kept and maintained by the Trump Organization. So the first one is suggesting that, and look at this really quickly, how difficult it is for them to get through with this nominal convoy because they only have one lead car. That's so dangerous. Look, like people are merging over and stuff. What a joke. He's barely getting a police escort. He's getting sandbagged here with like a 1-car escort. It's incredible. I mean, anyone could intercept that convoy right now. Crazy to think how poor the management of that seems to be. But anyway. Okay, so this is the Michael Cohen. Remember, Michael Cohen's attorney said, oh, well, the Trump organization or the Trump campaign never reimbursed Donald Trump. Right, but what about the family trust potentially reimbursing? The indictment, falsifying business records in the first degree. Okay, this is a repeat. Okay, here, now we're just going to get how it's different. They are literally sitting in rush hour traffic right now. I find this hard to believe that a convoy is in rush hour traffic. But anyway, okay, so let's just look at what's different, okay? So detailed general ledger for the Donald Trump revocable trust bearing voucher number, whatever, kept and maintained by the Trump organization. So let's number these. Ready? 1, 2. Here we go. Copy and paste again. Number 3 for another entry, voucher number and kept and maintained. Okay, detailed general ledger for the Trump revocable trust. Number 4, we have another count here for false entry for a check stub. Okay, check stub maintained by the Trump administration. What do we have? Another one over here. Another Mike. I mean, these are like an invoice from Michael Cohen. They're basically just calling every tiny little fart a different count here. This seems a little. Oh, hold on. What's going on here? Stand by.
This response so live. This is Todd Blanche and Joe Tacopina. I'm not sure if we have a camera there. I'll try to listen in.
We can see it.
Pass along what they're saying.
Who's got a camera on this guy? Hold on. No, not even, here we go.
In this country, you don't expect this to happen to somebody who was the president of the United States.
And his attorney.
On the one hand, there's not really any surprises. I know there was a lot of talk over the past several weeks and the past several days about what's going to be in this indictment and what's going to be there that we don't know. There must be something besides what we've been talking about for the past 4 or 5 years. There wasn't. There's nothing. The indictment itself is boilerplate. It doesn't allege any federal crime, any state crime that's been violated. It doesn't allege what the false statement is. And it's really disappointing. It's sad, and we're going to fight it. We're going to fight it hard.
Were you surprised? Were you surprised by anything in the indictment?
No.
How about you? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised there were no facts in there. I mean, normally in an indictment you have alleged facts. So they said that this was a false business record entry to aid and abet another crime. We're not saying what the other crime was.
Can you talk about his demeanor? How was he doing?
Trump's reaction was when he saw the charges against him.
When you say what his reaction was, what do you expect his reaction was? I mean, his reaction was exactly what would happen if it happened to anybody that I'm looking at now or anybody that's hearing what you're saying. He's frustrated, he's upset, but I'll tell you what, he's motivated, and it's not going to stop him, and it's not going to slow him down, and it's exactly what he expected, and so to that extent, there's no surprise. But he's also upset and frustrated and disappointed and mad that this happened.
What about the warnings against him?
Look, there was not a warning.
From the judge, talking about
the judge did not warn. The district attorney made a statement addressing what they perceive to be, I'm not sure what the words they use, inappropriate rhetoric of some sort. Obviously,
the audio is so bad here on CNN. Hold on, let's see if they have better audio here.
And quick question. So that's
no, they don't have any audio of this. Okay, let's try over here. Stand by.
And disappointed,
much
and
better,
mad that this happened.
Much better.
Warnings against his rhetoric on
What? There was not a warning. What do you mean?
From the judge, talking about
the judge did not warn. The district attorney made a statement addressing what they perceive to be. I'm not sure what the words they use. Inappropriate rhetoric of some sort. Obviously we responded. And the judge just took it in. The judge didn't warn. He asked the parties to consider what they're saying and not saying.
Guys, he did not admonish the president.
There was no admonishment.
That the president not use language that would incite violence or civil unrest.
He did not request that the president not use language. He requested that everybody involved refrain from using language that's inappropriate. And by the way, that includes the witnesses for the people who were talking just as much as the president.
The former president swinging a baseball bat at the head of the Manhattan DA.
Well, I don't know where you got that because if
That was a tweet sent out by the former president.
You know, it wasn't. And first of all, that picture was not swinging a baseball bat. I mean, if you want to distort the facts, go right ahead. I won't address that. Yes, it is. He wasn't swinging a baseball bat at anyone's head. That was a picture of him showing off an American-made bat. Someone else put a picture of the district attorney next to him, and in an article posted that. That's not his article. That's not his photos.
I love the lash out.
Guys, here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the insufficiency of this case. And I will say this to you. Today's unsealing of this indictment shows that the rule of law died in this country. Because while everyone is not above the law, no one's below it either. And if this man's name was not Donald J. Trump, there is no scenario we'd all be here today. Please understand that based on these charges.
What are we going to get tonight when he speaks?
When?
Tonight.
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
What are we going to hear?
Well, I don't know. You'll hear it.
You should tune in and you'll hear it.
We know.
Can you?
I love this lash out.
No.
Can you guys talk about? There's a lot of speculation about the unity among the defense attorneys.
Look at this.
There's
Look
a
at
lot
us.
Of, is that why you chose
Look.
to do this?
To come out together. We chose to come out together so we could speak with one voice. But there is no disunity here. That's gossip and it's nonsense. We've been working together and we will be working together.
And this, to me, quite frankly, is the best team I've ever worked with, the lawyers. I'm honored to be working with these guys. It's a family, it's a team, and we have one mission, and we'll achieve that mission.
What's your next move?
I mean, I'm going to go home and have some food.
What about the change of venue stuff? When do we?
I mean, we're going to start fighting the case. I didn't mean to be flippant.
When do you start filing motions? I'm assuming one of the first things you're going to do.
The judge set a motion schedule
to dismiss. I assume that'll be
the judge set a motion schedule that requires motion files in 4 months. So that's when we'll be filing motions.
Just some notion about how this is sort of like a novel, or do you?
It's not a notion. It's actually a fact. It's never been charged
talk
before.
about that. But
there's nothing else to say except the district attorney. This office has existed for decades and decades, and you can find one if you'd like. You'll never see a charge like this. Ever.
You understand this case? You understand this? As simple as this. A state prosecutor is prosecuting a federal election law violation that doesn't exist according to federal election law officials. It's as simple as that. That you could sum it all up like that.
Will there be anything else in your motion to dismiss?
That we haven't even come
What about
close
the
to
change of venue? There's all this talk. Can someone address that now?
Could potentially post discovery on social media.
Impromptu news conference outside the courthouse with the attorneys for former President Donald Trump, who right now is nearing LaGuardia Airport for his return to Florida after what was described as about a 45-minute long arraignment hearing in which a number of issues were discussed, including some of the tone of language that had concerned the DA's office.
Here, by the way, Trump in traffic again. Let's keep listening. Let's see if we can hear.
Wouldn't you be like
any other defendant want to be here
He's
today?
not going after the judge. He is not going after the judge. He commented that he thought that there were some issues that may cause a conflict. That's not going after the judge. He is not threatening the judge. He is not going after the judge.
He's going after the
He
DA.
has said that the DA, he is angry because the DA has brought a case that is unjustified. And so I'm not going to comment on it. You may disagree with the way he spoke,
Can
but
you
he
talk
is
about the
angry.
process? Was he fingerprinted? Was there a
I'm not going to
mugshot?
talk about it.
Was
more.
there a
In fact,
mugshot?
I think thank you for
What
your
about
attention.
fingerprints?
But we're going to
Thank you.
What
Thank
is
you.
his message? Thank you very much, counselors.
The drama continues. Again, I still can't believe a presidential motorcade is stuck in traffic. It is embarrassing.
False record, and he did it with the intent to conceal another crime, period. It doesn't really get into the theory of the case.
So it doesn't say that the other
Crime
created a federal election issue?
they don't say that, no. But so they have some optionality, I guess, to figure out what the crime is that was being concealed, but they never really specify it.
All right, hold on a second.
Does that seem odd to you?
Seems a little odd to me, but I don't know what the practice is.
Let's do a quick breakdown of the complete indictment against Donald Trump. It's 16 pages long, but surprisingly, it won't actually take that long to go through because the indictment doesn't really give us anything juicy. It doesn't give us evidence. It doesn't tell us potentially what crime was elevated. That is, remember what Donald Trump is being charged with here. Falsifying business records. On its own, if you write, a check for a restaurant meal for you and your wife, and then you say it was a business expense, that potentially, and even though you did no business, maybe that could be argued as falsifying business records, right? That might be a misdemeanor. Generally, falsifying business records are a misdemeanor. If now that potentially led you to cover up that you actually stole the money you used to pay for that dinner because you edited the source of the check or the signature, or you used somebody else's check, it could be argued that that misdemeanor is now going to get elevated to a felony, a Class E felony in New York. It's the lowest class of felony that exists. But that's essentially what's being done with Donald Trump here. The argument is, hey, you paid off essentially Stormy Daniels through Michael Cohen, maybe not the Trump organization or the Trump campaign itself, but maybe you used your family trust to do it, which kind of circumvents and finds the hole in Michael Cohen's attorney's a letter saying Donald Trump never reimbursed the money. So going down that hole, if Donald Trump then had his trust commit or reimburse Stormy Daniels via Michael Cohen for a hush money for her not making comments during Trump's political campaign, then the argument that New York is trying to make is, well, you making that payment in a roundabout way was a misdemeanor falsifying documents, but it also, in our opinion, violated campaign finance rules, so now we're going to elevate it to a felony. That is essentially the allegation here, and we don't really get much more evidence of it. Here's the actual set. Now, what I've done is I've gone through and just highlighted the stuff that's not copy and paste, because most of this indictment of the 34 counts is copy and paste. So the 34 counts, I will read each of the 34 counts to you, specifically the parts that are different. An invoice from Michael Cohen dated Feb 14, 2017. A detailed general ledger from Donald Trump, a revocable trust. A detailed general ledger from Donald Trump, revocable trust with a different number. A check and check stub from Feb 14. An invoice from Michael Cohen. That's already count 5. Count 6, a voucher from the general ledger of the accounting books. A check stub, count 7. A false entry of business records, count 8. This is all related to the same stuff. Detailed general entry, count 9. Check number and check stub, count 10. You've got an invoice from Michael Cohen dated May 22nd, count 11. A false entry of business record into detail of the general ledger for Donald Trump with a voucher number, count 12. Count 13, check number and check date or check stub. Count 14, false entry of business records and from an invoice of Michael Cohen. Then we've got an entry into detailed ledger for Donald J. Trump bearing voucher number, blah, 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 maintained by the Trump organization. Count 16, account check and check stub dated June 19th. So it's basically every single check and invoice that was potentially used to reimburse Michael Cohen is being counted here. Here's count 17, which is another invoice from Michael Cohen. Count 18, general ledger. Count 19, a check. Count 20, an invoice. Count 21, a general ledger entry, which is basically 3 per, right? It's invoice, ledger, check. Invoice, ledger, check. Here's another count number 22, check. Count 23, invoice. Count 24, general ledger. Count number 25, check. Count number 26, invoice. Count 27, entry. Count 28, check. See the pattern here? Count 29, invoice. Count 20, I'm already on count 30, general ledger entry. Count number 31, check. And then can you guess what's going to be next? Invoice, ledger, check stub. That's literally it. Over and over and over again here. The same allegation. I think the only one that's really different is the first one here. Although this is, it's an invoice from Michael Cohen. So invoice, it doesn't even really matter because none of them are really unique. So it looks like a couple ledger entries maybe for the first one. That's how we get 3 counts per. And maybe these are 11 checks and one of them had 2 entries or something like that. So there's no evidence here. They're just allegations. There's no evidence of why they're elevating this to a felony. There's nothing. Now, we expect the DA to give some kind of press conference breaking down these 34 different allegations here. But the next court hearing is now set for December 4th. Motions are due in 4 months, which would be August. So motions due in August. The court proceeding or the next hearing would potentially be December 2023. The trial against Trump could start January of 2024. And the judge is saying they want to move judiciously, except they're still going to take 9 months to move judiciously. So it seems a little ludicrous to me that there was a lack of really evidence provided here. I think this really actually does the opposite that the prosecution wants to accomplish and just reinvigorates Republicans to look at this and go, are you serious? This is an empty indictment. There's no new information on this. You're still not providing evidence. You're 3Xing. You're basically taking the same instance of hush money payments made to potentially 2 individuals, which may not even be an election crime, a federal election commission crime. It may not even be that. It's been refused to be prosecuted before on a federal level because to some extent, some people might argue that, hey, like paying somebody to sign an NDA might be a fair use of campaign money, even if it was the campaign that paid for it. Yet now, 11 different invoices, check stubs, and ledger entries are being used as a tool to say, oh, there are 34 counts of felonies against Trump. It's all the same instance, the same circumstance, essentially. Maybe you could say 2 hush money payments. But again, is that necessarily wrong? And is it a felony? Or is this, as we've said or have heard, a political witch hunt? We'll see. But that gives you the actual full text of the indictment. Let's keep listening over here.
Information and unlawful activity from American voters before and after the 2016 election. So that is where he is laying out a motive that goes with the story that goes with the charges.
And Kara Scannell standing by, you've also been looking at this.
Well, interesting. I just want to add on to what John was saying there because in court today, one of the prosecutors laid out what this theory was. He said that these falsified business records were done with the intent to commit or conceal another crime. Specifically, he said to undermine the integrity of the 2016 presidential election and as part of an unlawful effort to promote Trump's candidacy, that they were doing these deals to bury some of these stories. Now,
okay, I want to just give a reiteration here. Let's see here. I think we might. Is the DA live yet? So far, I do not see the DA yet on any station. Not yet. Okay. Okay, this is interesting. So as we're about to go through the Trump indictment and continue to hear updates on the Trump case, apparently the Manhattan District Attorney is now suggesting that Trump's scheme included a $30,000 payment to a former Trump doorman who alleged that Trump fathered a child out of a wedlock. Again, worth remembering, mark your calendar for these dates. We have the judge has set the next court hearing for December 4th. Trump's legal team has said that motions to potentially dismiss or otherwise are due within 4 months. So that means August for motions, December for the next court appearance, and potentially a trial 9 months from now in January of 2024. Worth also remembering that these counts against Trump are only felonies if they are used or if the actual instance of concealment was done with the intent to defraud and as a way to potentially commit another crime. Let's get into some more details.
I got $10.
Ooh. Listen.
And how did this relate to that?
Yeah, that may be why we saw, so we were watching the Trump attorneys, there was like a lot of laughter. They may have been laughing at the contents of this. And that's what you're hearing on the Trump side as well, that this is that there's no surprises in here and zero meat on the bones in terms of what they're pointing to. It seems like they could have put that indictment together months ago based on what it looks like. It's not like there's a ton of investigation details that have been revealed here today. So That's where we are as we watch this motorcade. We watched it arrive yesterday, and now the former president is on his way back home to Mar-a-Lago. We thought we might hear from him at a couple of points today. We did not. My guess is that he's anxious to be wheels up and headed back to Mar-a-Lago with this episode behind him, at least for now. There will be motions, and we're just that podium that you're looking at there is where Alvin Bragg is going to come out. And boy, I think we're going to be very interested to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, no kidding. By the way, Jack has a big thank you. Jack, why don't you say thank you? Look at that. You just got $10. Jack's trying to buy an Apple Watch, and I told him he had to earn money by learning to speak German with me. And now he's collecting all these super chats. Jack, you see how that one's $10 from Blue Bison right there? Yeah. Okay. Big shout out. Thank you for that. And also, Jeff just gave you $20 saying Jack's back. Congratulations. But I just want you to know that's $30 right there. YouTube's going to take $10 of that away for a commission. How do you feel about that? Sad. Yes. Okay. All right, let's listen to it over
waiting to hear from Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, of course, who brought this 34-count indictment against the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, moments ago, pleading not guilty to those 34 charges, largely focused on falsifying business records. All of this going down a few minutes ago at the Manhattan Criminal Court. The president is returning right now to LaGuardia Airport. He will fly back to Florida at his Mar-a-Lago compound in Palm Beach. We understand that he is still going to make comments on this later this evening. We don't know in what form, whether he'll answer questions, make a speech, a combination therein. He is going to speak. A judge did not issue a gag order here on any of this, but had advised him to watch his social media use ahead of hearing from Alvin Bragg, and that could happen any minute. I do want to go to Brian Yennis right now with what went down in there. And again, courtesy Jake Gibson as well, who was in that courtroom to find out exactly what transpired. Brian.
Neil, yeah, we'll begin right now just on the indictment. What we now know before DA Alvin Bragg speaks is that these are 34 felony counts for falsifying business records in New York. And in the indictment, the first line reads, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal criminal conduct that hid damaging information from the voting public during the 2016 presidential election. Those are the counts and it goes on and on at this point. We're still kind of sifting through it. We're going to hear more from the DA Bragg. Let's bring in Jake Gibson. He is a Department of Justice producer for us at the Fox News channel. He was inside the courtroom. Jake, run us through again just what it was like to be in there. Well, tell me what you know about the counts and the indictment from what you heard in there.
We know there's 34 counts, and we know that they have to do with fraud on business dealings in New York, and that they're upped him to a felony because they're saying that he did that in furtherance of his campaign to hide these alleged hush payments to Stormy Daniels, and that is therefore how they get the rationale to get to a felony. Mr. Trump said audibly not guilty when asked.
So yeah, he was asked by the judge.
Say thank you right here. Give a shout out to Curtis. Get in here. Get in here. Say thank you, Curtis.
Thank you, Curtis.
And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
How about thank you, Curtis, for the $100?
Thank you, Curtis, for the $90.
Gain the lead. All right.
These are some incendiary communications and posts that former President Trump has put out there that could incite violence. And we want you to do something about it to the judge.
Prosecution handed over to Judge Juan Merchan.
Actual printouts of posts from former President Trump. I think probably the one where he's holding the baseball bat, because that did come up. They brought that up, that there's a post where he's holding a baseball bat near DA Bragg. Okay. And then they passed in these things. And Judge Merchan said he talked about the rhetoric, and he said the charged nature of these posts. And he said, he said, I'm making a request. It's not an order at this point. I'm making a request of you and your client, to his defense attorneys and to former President Trump. Refrain from making comments that could incite violence or conduct that could jeopardize the rule of law. I'm asking you to do this. And if, at this point, I'm not making an order, but if I saw a post like this in front of me again, I might think about that. Right. So that's one major thing that happened in there. And then the other is the timing you're talking about. Right.
Right.
The prosecution said that they would like a trial in January of 2024. which for all of us who watch politics intently would be just amazing, because there we are in the heat of the presidential primaries. We're talking about Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and the idea that Mr. Trump, former President Trump, would have to come to court every day when he wants to be campaigning every day. That must be a real. That's probably a non-starter for him, right?
What did his defense say about when they want to come to court?
They said they wanted as much time as they could get. They didn't even specify a time. What they said was, look, we got this indictment a half hour ago. Like, give us time to read the indictment. You're talking about a court date. You're talking about starting a trial.
It's a good observation, though, that would be around primary time. Let's listen in over here from
There was some discussion about a motion schedule. I'll repeat that initially prosecutors had wanted a trial date of January 2024. However, the defense said that probably wasn't realistic. They were looking more towards a trial date of spring of 2024. No final date was issued or ruled on by the judge, but there will be motions over the next several months. Discovery will be put forth over the next several months. And we expect the next time that the former president was expected to be here in the courtroom was in December. There was also some discussion whether he might have to actually be here or whether he could waive his appearance and just let the attorneys meet here. The judge seemed inclined not to let that happen, but former President Trump's attorneys argued that because of the expense, because of the security issues, that may be a possibility down the line. But that issue remains unresolved. Something else, the prosecution wanted a restrictive order to try and prevent the former president from taking some of the discovery and actually leaking it himself, posting it on social media, using it to defend himself in the court of public opinion, rather than use it to mount his own legal defense. I just asked Joe Tacopina, the attorney for former President Trump, about that just now. He said that wasn't going to happen. Those were his words. But Lester, the arraignment brought up so many questions about free speech and threats against the judicial system as this plays out, really unprecedented in so many ways. But again, criticism from the former president's attorneys arguing that they don't have enough of a case here. But again, 34 felony counts as we await this press conference from DA Alvin Bragg to respond to questions about why this case was brought right now.
Yeah, another question about the color in the room. We know that he has a Secret Service detail. Were they evident? Were they standing near him?
Yes, there were several Secret Service agents in the room. I was also watching on a monitor to be able to see his face. It was a crowded courtroom. We were also sitting in an overflow room that was next door to that particular courtroom, where we were able to watch that video feed. And there were Secret Service agents that came into the room. The former president came straight in, stood at the center of the table, front row center, and again, stayed quiet for most of the proceedings, would occasionally lean over to talk to one of his lawyers. And again, only said very few things throughout the procedure, but but notably made it very clear he himself was the one who pleaded not guilty.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you for that report. And I want to note that we were watching there a moment ago the former president's plane at LaGuardia Airport. Mr. Trump, we just got a glimpse of him boarding the aircraft. And he'll be heading back to Florida, planning to deliver a speech tonight. Given the remarks today about some of his statements, it will be interesting for everyone to find out exactly how far he goes in his criticism of this prosecution that is now officially underway. Hallie, it's going to be a long, if this is many months, a year. Over time, this will look different one way or the other.
Well, I mean, I look at the date that he is next going to be appearing in court based on the reporting from inside the courtroom from Gabe and Adam, December. I mean, we will be in the thick of the Republican primaries here at that point, Lester. I mean, likely we don't know what the Republican debate schedule will be. We will likely be in those at the time that the former president.
Well, it looks like this is getting ready here.
Does this extend, do you think, based on what you heard in there? Did the judge say stay off of Truth Social? Did the judge, in your opinion, say don't make remarks, for instance, tonight at Mar-a-Lago? How far
They just put up that banner right there. What is that? $130K hush money payment, 34 counts, falsifying records, conceal another crime.
And that this investigation's been going on for years, and what they allege are selective leaks that are coming out that are damaging to Mr. Trump, and why shouldn't he be able to defend himself? So I think what the judge was saying is, he never said don't do a press conference. He definitely didn't say that. What he said was, I don't want to see stuff that could incite violence. So I think he wanted to tell him that you have your First Amendment rights to defend yourself and to speak freely, but not what I would rather not see is something that is going to cause violence out there or is going to hurt the rule of law. You know.
Okay. Neil.
All right, you answered that. No, thank you guys very, very much. We're waiting for Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, to come in. I've been picking apart through these 34 felony counts, and some of them, frankly, are redundant, but they all go back essentially to falsifying business records under something called Article 175 of the New York Penal Law. Now, you might be hearing this, and what does this have to do with the former president of the United States on a federal issue? Well, they're saying that falsifying business records, though a felony in New York, can extend to more severe crimes if there is an intent to defraud. That includes the intent to commit another crime or aid to conceal a crime already a crime. I know that sounds verbose. What it means is, though, there are 34 felony counts here. Each count really represents a separate instance of misconduct or something that you shouldn't be doing. It is not a distinct different crime. And that's important to emphasize here. You might notice this idea of redundancy, but most of these counts stemming back to payments to two women. I think you're familiar with the women by now, but this idea that they were by making the payments and trying to get hush money, or that seems to be the implication here, that they were covering a crime with yet another crime and confusing people in the process. Now, if convicted on a felony bookkeeping fraud charges, which this is at its bare minimum is what the former president is facing, that could mean a sentence of up to 4 years in prison for each count. Now, that does not appear to be the direction this necessarily will go, but the charge doesn't carry any mandatory prison sentence. In other words, that isn't baked into the cake that you're found guilty on such a count or multiple counts that you're going to go to the big house. But even if convicted on all of those counts, in this case, a former president wouldn't necessarily be facing jail time. Says nothing about the kind of things that he would not be allowed to do. For example.
Yeah, well, we're just waiting for that press conference right now. I think that's going to be the most important part there. By the way, seriously, thank you for the donations. This is just a pisser on Apple really quick. I'm just going to say it really quick. I have 2 old Apple Watches here that I wanted to set up as a family member for Jack. And I told him that before we streamed this, I told him he has to earn money to buy one of the Apple Watch SEs for like $249 or whatever. And so I'm going to, all of the donations that y'all have sent, I'm going to give to him. I'll give it to him in full. I'll pay YouTube's commission, and I'll make sure he gets one, because both of these are dead, like they're bricked. They don't charge. And I looked at Apple, how much to fix them? $350 to fix the old watches. I buy a new one for $249. Doesn't even make sense. Anyway, seriously, thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to thank y'all. I really appreciate y'all, and you being here motivates me every single day. And it's not easy waking up super early. Not that that's the hardest part of the day. I'm just saying, like, oh, here we go.
Felonies, and
thank you. I appreciate it.
34 separate felonies. We're going to go to DA Bragg right now.
Here we go.
I'm jumping
Thank
on you,
you
buddy.
for
Alvin
joining
Bragg
us
is
here
talking
today.
right now. He's, of course, the prosecutor in this case.
Earlier this afternoon, Donald Trump was arraigned on a New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct. The defendant repeatedly made false statements on New York business records. He also caused others to make false statements. The defendant claimed that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. This simply was not true.
I mean, even if the money went to Stormy Daniels, it was a legal service, right?
Month after month in 2017. April, May, June, and so on through the rest of the year. For 9 straight months, the defendant held documents in his hand containing this key lie, that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. And he personally signed checks for payments to Michael Cohen for each of these 9 months. In total, the grand jury found there were 34 documents with this critical false statement. Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements? The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the 3 people that they paid to keep quiet was a woman named Stormy Daniels. Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. That payment was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap, and the false statements in AMI's books violated New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements about his payments to Mr. Cohen. He could not simply say that the payments were a reimbursement for Mr. Cohen's payments to Stormy Daniels. To do so, to make that true statement, would have been to admit a crime. So instead, Mr. Trump said that he was paying Mr. Cohen for fictitious legal services in 2017 to cover up actual crime committed the prior year. And in order to get Michael Cohen his money back, they planned one last false statement. In order to complete the scheme, they planned to mischaracterize the repayments to Mr. Cohen as income to the New York State tax authorities. The conduct I just described and that which was charged by the grand jury is felony criminal conduct in New York State. True and accurate business records are important everywhere, to be sure. They are all the more important in Manhattan, the financial center of the world. That is why we have a history in the Manhattan DA's office of vigorously enforcing white-collar crime. My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at arraignment earlier today, has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records. This charge, it can be said, is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. And fraud presents itself in all different forms here in Manhattan. We have charged falsifying business records for those who violated federal bank secrecy laws. We have charged falsifying business records for those who were seeking to cover up sex crimes. And we have brought this charge for those who committed tax violations. At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white-collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable. As this office has done time and time again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle. I'll now take questions.
Right.
Oh, let's hear it.
So we're going to take a limited number of questions. There are no follow-up questions.
Limited questions.
I will call on you. And again, we have limited time. Thank you. The first question will be Rick.
I think Ricky wants to say why now? I think some argue that this is a political move. You're not going to be a political person. If Ricky is going to go into
We conducted a thorough and rigorous investigation, as we're known to do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I've been doing this for 24 years and I'm no stranger to rigorous, complex investigations. I bring cases when they're ready. Having now conducted a rigorous, thorough investigation, the case was ready to be brought, and it was brought.
Mr. Bragg, the indictment says that there were 34 false business records. And they would then conceal another crime, but the indictment does not specifically say what those crimes were. We are assuming perhaps that they might be election related. I'm wondering if you can specify what laws were also broken.
Sure. So let me say as an initial matter, the indictment doesn't specify that because the law does not so require. In my remarks, I mentioned a couple of laws, which I will highlight again now. The first is New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities. I also noted the federal election law cap on contribution limits.
But why weren't there those crimes charged? Why wasn't he charged with those crimes?
Well, I'm not going to go into our deliberative process on what was brought. The charges that were brought were the ones that were brought. The evidence in the law is the basis for those decisions.
You had expressed a year ago that you had some reservations about the case's readiness. Can you talk to us about what were some of the questions in your mind that needed to be answered in order to bring a case this magnitude?
I'm not going to go chapter and verse into any thinking. What I will say is, I believe the time period you're talking about, I've been in office for a couple of months. The investigation, in my view, was not concluded into the conduct in particular that is the basis for the charges today. Since that time, we've had more evidence made available to the office and opportunity to meet with additional witnesses. So as I said earlier, I've been doing this for 24 years. I don't bring cases prior to a thorough and rigorous investigation. Now, having done so, the case has been brought.
Mr. Bragg, Garrett Hake with NBC News. Your predecessor took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Federal prosecutors took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Do you believe you have new evidence that led you to decide to charge this, or why now?
Well, as I just mentioned, we have had available to the office additional evidence that was not in the office's possession prior to my time here. And as to your part of your question about the federal, we have a distinct and strong, I would say profound, independent interest in New York State. This is the business capital of the world. We regularly do cases involving false business statements. The bedrock, in fact, the basis for business integrity and a well-functioning business marketplace is true and accurate record keeping. That's the charge that's brought here, falsifying New York State business records.
DA Bragg, I'm just going to read back one line from your statement facts. The participants also took steps that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of payments and furtherance of the scheme. Do you allege former President Trump was one of the participants who mischaracterized the payments for tax purposes?
I'm not going to go beyond the plain language statement of facts, which I think speaks for itself.
Brad, can you please comment on the strength of the evidence that Trump personally intended to violate state election law, including actions that are charged with indictment?
So the charge is falsifying business records. The charge requires, as I specified, criminal conduct that was concealed. One of the concealed crimes we allege is New York State election law. I So we went through, and our statement of facts, which I think many of you have in front of you, goes through things including text messages, emails, contemporaneous phone records, multiple witnesses. All of that will be, as you saw in the fall, borne out in a public courtroom in downtown Manhattan.
Our last question is Jonah.
Yeah, Greg, the charges related to the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, the release from your office also mentions another woman, Karen McDougal, as well as a doorman. Can you comment on how those players are related to the charges you've brought or to the case overall?
I'm glad you put your finger on that, because it's not just about one payment. It is 34 business records, 34 false statements in business records that were concealing criminal conduct. And the earlier question about New York State election law, when I talked about conspiracy to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. Those unlawful means, we allege, include the conduct set forth in the statement of facts, which is additional false statements separate and apart from the charged ones in AMI documents, planned false statements to taxing authorities. It is not just that one $130,000 wire payment. Thanks so much.
Any comment about any incitement of violence by former president?
All right, Alvin Bragg laying out his case that this is different than the case that was rejected by Cyrus Vance, the district attorney of New York before him, and the Federal Election Commission that saw no there and didn't want to pursue this case. He opted otherwise, and hence this 34-count indictment that largely stems from alleged 2016 hush money payments, but there's a lot of duplication here. I want to get into this a little bit more. David Spund, who I rudely interrupted by going to this presser, thought it important to do so. But David, looking at these charges, there is a lot of redundancy here, and there's not a lot of whole new here. What are you getting a sense of?
Well, first of all, no problem, because Alvin Bragg is a huge newsmaker today. But Neil, what's curious is that, this specific charge, felony counts for falsifying business records in the first degree mention, and I'm reading, an intent to commit another crime, though Bragg doesn't say what the other crime is in the 16-page indictment. In fact, as we all just saw there together live, he was asked about that and said the law doesn't require him to say so. So, number one, that is curious that he doesn't get into specifics about covering up or committing potentially a second crime. The other thing that's interesting that you mentioned is, sure, we know about the statements, or the payments rather, to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal.
All right, let's just quickly go through the Bragg situation here. So we know the indictment's out. We saw the indictment. Let's just give a quick summary here of Bragg's press conference. Here's a quick summary of what Alvin Bragg just had to say about Donald Trump. The easiest way to begin with it is just by pulling up the actual poster that was present at the Alvin Bragg press conference. That's right here. So basically, the argument is here that Donald Trump paid $30,000 in hush money to a doorman at Trump Tower, $130,000 to woman one, which would be Stormy Daniels, which had 11 falsified invoices, 12 general ledger entries that were falsified, and 11 falsified checks. That's how you get to 34 counts. So you can see all of that is related. All those 34 counts are related to $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. Now, they're also mentioning $30,000 going to the doorman and $150,000 going to woman number one, who's likely Karen McDougal. Now, what's interesting is there are no allegations against Trump for the $30K or the $150, because that's not necessarily a crime. It's not necessarily a crime to say, hey, if you sign this non-disclosure agreement, here's some money. Now, you could try to stretch that and say, well, maybe that violates some kind of campaign finance rules, but that's quite a stretch. Although that's exactly what's also being alleged with Michael Cohen, in that during the press conference, Mr. Bragg mentioned, hey, well, Michael Cohen tried to say that his $130,000 payments that he received, which ended up getting funneled to Stormy Daniels, were income for him. And that's a violation of New York tax code, and a campaign contribution limitation is somehow this crazy stitched together argument. Look, I'm not here to take a side, left, right, whatever. My goal is just to report what happened. And this, I don't know how you could look at it as anything other than a relatively loose case. It's really loose. Like, you know, when you have The Economist coming out, which hates Donald Trump, The Economist, the magazine, they hate Donald Trump, and they actually have pretty good economic information. When they come out and say, yeah, you better have some pretty smoking gun information because you're dividing a nation by stitching something together, just makes the American political climate worse. And if anything, it helps lead Donald Trump to gain more popularity. But anyway, on Alvin's Bragg press conference, talks about the 34 counts. Again, we've already added those up. Each of those could potentially face 4 years as a criminal penalty. That adds up to 136 potential years in jail if Donald Trump was convicted and got 4 years for all of these. Keep in mind, they would have to conclude that Donald Trump had the intent to defraud, and you'd have to prove that in court, that he had the intent and knew exactly everything that was going on for all of these different cases, every single different ledger entry. Did Donald Trump know about it? Is there proof beyond a reasonable doubt that not only he knew about it, but that he had the intent to defraud? And should it be considered a felony? Or is it something that'll end up just settling away as a monetary penalty? Alvin Bragg got his press conference and his hour on TV or whatever, and maybe it goes away. Who knows? Anyway, we know that Donald Trump is now fundraising with images from his quote-unquote arrest. They're using images like this to fundraise, which is a picture of Donald Trump here in front of the black and white mugshot measurement bars, and not guilty under it. Donald Trump's NFT sales are recordedly increasing in value after having lost a lot. You've got Donald Trump running ads on Truth Social indicating, "I need your help." Grand jury votes to indict Donald Trump in New York, and they purposely use the New York Times here, which is, the publication that a lot of people on the right are not big fans of. You've got Donald Trump here walking into court, pretty stern face as he walks into court, waving into the court building. In the actual court without Secret Service immediately behind him, instead court law enforcement officers behind him, and presumably Secret Service behind there. Another fake image here of Donald Trump. There's that fundraising picture again. Here's another sort of fake AI image of Donald Trump being booked. Here's a claim of a $10 donation from the judge, Juan Mercan, to occupation judge, $10. I haven't independently verified this, so I'm not 100% certain if this is real, but it's a $10 donation, July 27th, 2020, earmarked Stop Republicans. This, by the way, comes as the judge's daughter apparently worked for the Biden-Harris campaign and potentially also worked for Adam Schiff's campaign. You have this belief, this pretty large belief that really this is just a political show to get Donald Trump, which after all, both Letitia James and District Attorney Alvin Bragg ran on the premise of getting Trump. And that's why they've sort of renewed or brought life into this particular case. Letitia James bringing her own case of a $250 million civil lawsuit against Trump for falsifying real estate values. The Bragg press conference went on to argue that Donald Trump used multiple shell companies to try to conceal these records, and that ultimately Stormy Daniels was the one recipient who had the largest amount of, actually all of the crimes were related to her. As we saw, we already broke that down. Again, they'll have to prove that Donald Trump made these false statements with the intent to defraud and then conceal. When Alvin Bragg was asked about the specific crimes that he committed beyond just falsifying business records, he states that a New York election law was broken, that it is a crime to conspire for an election, and then, of course, felony intent to defraud via the falsification of business records, the other crime being New York election law. So trying to purposely stay away from any kind of federal law in claims against Donald Trump here. Chuck Schumer thinks Trump is going to get a fair trial. Marco Rubio says we're going to regret today for a very long time that America today crossed the line. There's also commentary that the judge who presided over the lawsuit by the other woman who potentially received more hush money payments than Stormy Daniels, her judge dismissed her defamation case against Tucker Carlson because the claim was that, or the argument the judge made was that Tucker Carlson simply made a sort of hyperbole and an exaggerated statement about her case. And so, in other words, the first person who sued Tucker Carlson for suggesting Tucker Carlson suggested she extorted Donald Trump for that $150,000, lost her lawsuit, had her lawsuit dismissed by a Manhattan District Court judge who was appointed by Donald Trump. That judge calling it exaggeration, rhetorical hyperbole, and opinion commentary intended to frame a debate. So that gives you some insight into all of what really broke down today with this Donald Trump indictment. It seems like no real new evidence was provided, and will probably divide the nation further, especially since we'll have at least 4 months before motions are due in this case, and potentially another 9 months before this actually goes to trial. So with that said, I thank you so very much for being here. Make sure you check out those programs on Building Your Wealth link down below. You get lifetime access. You can now use Buy Now, Pay Later to join them. Lifetime access to all those course member live streams. And anytime I add value to them, you get that, as well as buy, sell alerts when I'm trading. And folks, I hope to see you there. It's a great supplement of some of the direct Q&A we do and some of the analysis we do. And I'd love to see you there, whether it's for real estate or stocks. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much again. And until next time.